The Hindu Kush Mountains rose like broken teeth against a sky the color of old bruises. Captain Jessica Kaine hung suspended beneath the HH-60 Pavehawk helicopter, 150 feet of fast rope burning through her gloves as she descended into what intelligence had cheerfully classified as a hot landing zone. Hot was putting it mildly. The Taliban owned these mountains, had owned them for 1,000 years, and they did not appreciate uninvited guests. The rotor wash from the helicopter turned the Afghan dust into a sandstorm that scoured exposed skin raw. Reaper, they called her. The call sign had stuck after her fourth combat rescue when a Marine gunny sergeant, delirious from blood loss and 3 days without water, had looked up at her through the haze of pain and said, "You are like the Grim Reaper, except you bring people back instead of taking them away." The name fit. In 2 years of combat operations, Jessica Kaine had pulled 43 operators out of situations where the only expected outcome was a folded flag and a somber ceremony. Today would be number 44 if she was lucky. If she was very, very lucky. Her boots hit the rocky ground and she released the rope, already moving, already calculating. The downed pilot was 200 meters northeast, sheltering in a dried riverbed behind what remained of a Soviet-era tank. The Taliban had him pinned down with at least 2 PKM machine guns and small arms fire that sounded like angry hornets made of lead. The pilot's name was Captain Marcus Webb, 28 years old, father of twin girls he had never met because deployment schedules in real life rarely overlapped in convenient ways. His F-16 had taken a surface-to-air missile through the port engine 17 minutes ago. He had ejected successfully, landed badly, broken his left leg in 2 places, and was now learning the hard way that being a fighter jock looked a lot more glamorous from 30,000 feet. Reaper moved through the terrain like water finding the path of least resistance, using every dip in the ground, every rock outcropping, every shadow. Combat rescue officers spent 2 years learning how to do this, how to become invisible in plain sight, how to slip through enemy lines like smoke through a chain-link fence. The training pipeline had an 80% washout rate. The human body was not designed to endure what the instructors demanded. Sleep deprivation, underwater demolition, high-altitude parachute jumps, combat medicine under fire, advanced weapons training, survival in environments that actively tried to kill you. Most candidates broke. The ones who did not break became something else entirely. They became weapons with a heartbeat and a mission. The first Taliban fighter never saw her coming. He was focused on the riverbed, finger on the trigger of his PKM, pouring rounds downrange in controlled bursts. Professional, experienced, dangerous. Reaper came up behind him silent as a prayer and drove her knife into the soft tissue just behind his collarbone, angling down into the subclavian artery. He died making a sound like a punctured tire, surprise and oxygen escaping simultaneously. She lowered him to the ground with something approaching tenderness. He was somebody's son, maybe somebody's father, just another man caught in the machinery of war. But he had been about to kill Marcus Webb, and that made him a problem that required a permanent solution. The second machine gunner realized his partner had gone quiet. He turned, bringing his weapon around, mouth opening to shout a warning. Reaper's suppressed M4 coughed twice. Both rounds caught him center mass. He sat down hard, looked at the spreading red stain on his chest with an expression of profound confusion, and then toppled sideways. 2 down, approximately 8 to 10 remaining, scattered through the rocks above the riverbed. She keyed her radio, voice barely above a whisper. "Eagle 2-7, this is Reaper. I have visual on the package. Initiating extraction. Recommend gun run on my mark. Danger close." The A-10 Thunderbolt pilot orbiting 12,000 feet above her responded immediately. His call sign was Hammer, and his voice carried the relaxed confidence of a man who flew a plane specifically designed to kill tanks and ruin the day of anyone unfortunate enough to be on the receiving end of a 30-millimeter rotary cannon. "Copy, Reaper. Standing by for your mark. Make it count." Captain Marcus Webb lay behind the burned-out tank, clutching his broken leg, face pale with shock and blood loss. His survival radio was still clipped to his vest. His sidearm was in his hand. When Reaper materialized out of the dust and chaos like something from a fever dream, his first instinct was to bring the weapon up. Training overrode panic half a second later. He lowered the pistol, recognition flooding his eyes. The patch on her shoulder read USAF Pararescue, with the distinctive winged emblem that every downed pilot prayed to see. Guardian Angel, they called the PJs. But Reaper was not a pararescue jumper. She was a CRO, a combat rescue officer, which meant she had all the medical training and tactical skills of a PJ, but also carried the authority to command the entire rescue operation. She was the one who made the calls that meant life or death. Captain Webb, she said, already assessing his injuries with hands that move with practiced efficiency. Compound fracture of the left tibia and fibula, the bone visible through torn flight suit material. Possible concussion, pupils slightly dilated but reactive. Respiration elevated but steady. Blood pressure likely dropping from shock and pain, but not critical yet. I am going to splint this leg and then we are going to move. Can you walk with support? Marcus Webb tried to smile. It came out more like a grimace. I can try. Trying is good. Reaper pulled a collapsible splint from her aid bag, hands moving with the speed that came from repeating the same actions hundreds of times in training until they became muscle memory that functioned independent of conscious thought. But I need you to do more than try. I need you to move like your life depends on it, because it absolutely does. She splinted the leg in 40 seconds, secured it with quick wrapping tape that would hold long enough to matter. Then she produced a syringe of morphine from her kit, showed it to him. This is going to take the edge off. You'll still hurt, but you'll be able to function. We have about 90 seconds before they realize their machine gunners are gone and come looking. Questions? Marcus shook his head. His jaw was clenched so tight the muscles stood out like cables under skin. No, ma'am, let's get the hell out of here. She injected the morphine, watched his pupils dilate further as the drug hit his system. Then she hauled him upright with a strength that seemed impossible for her frame. She was 5'7", maybe 140 pounds soaking wet, but years of carrying weighted rucks and injured teammates had built functional strength that did not show up in gym mirror selfies. She got his arm over her shoulder, took most of his weight, started moving. They made it 20 meters before the Taliban figured out something was wrong. Shouting erupted from the rocks above. Small arms fire began kicking up dust around their feet. Reaper keyed her radio while moving, never breaking stride, breathing controlled despite the exertion. Hammer, this is Reaper. Need that gun run now. Danger close, I say again, danger close. Target is the ridgeline 100 meters northeast of the riverbed. We are moving southwest toward extraction point. Hammer's response was immediate and carried the particular kind of enthusiasm that only an A-10 pilot felt when cleared hot on a target. Copy Reaper. Guns, guns, guns. The sound of a GAU-8 Avenger rotary cannon firing is something felt in the bones before it is heard with the ears. 7 barrels rotating at 4,000 rounds per minute, each 30-millimeter shell designed to penetrate tank armor. When that weapon system spoke, mountains listened. The ridge line above them erupted in a line of explosions that walked from north to south like the footsteps of an angry god. Rocks shattered into shrapnel. The Taliban fighters who were not immediately killed by the cannon fire died from the secondary effects, crushed by falling stone or torn apart by ricochets. The ones who survived stopped shooting at Reaper and Marcus and started running, which was the correct tactical decision, but came about 30 seconds too late. Reaper hauled Marcus Webb through the kill zone, ignoring the debris raining down around them, ignoring the heat and the noise and the part of her brain that screamed, "This is insane, you are going to die." That voice had been screaming for 2 years. She had learned to turn down the volume. The extraction point was a cleared area 200 meters from the riverbed where the HH-60 could land without turning itself into a very expensive pinata for anyone with a rocket-propelled grenade. They covered the distance in 3 minutes that felt like 3 hours. By the time they reached it, Reaper's lungs burned and her legs shook, and Marcus had passed out from pain despite the morphine. She lowered him to the ground, popped smoke to mark their position, brought her rifle up, and scanned for threats. The Pave Hawk came in fast and hard, flaring at the last second, skids kissing the earth just long enough for the crew chief to jump out and help load Marcus onto the stretcher. The whole evolution took less than 15 seconds. Reaper climbed aboard last, hand on the skid, 1 foot on the deck when she saw movement in the rocks. Taliban fighter, young, maybe 16, RPG launcher on his shoulder, lining up a shot that would turn the helicopter into burning wreckage. She could have shot him. Her rifle was in her hands. She had the angle. But she also had one foot in the helicopter, and Marcus Webb was already inside, and the crew chief was pulling her aboard, and sometimes you had to make a choice between revenge and survival. She chose survival. The helicopter lifted off, gaining altitude fast, banking hard to the left. The RPG round passed through the space they had occupied 3 seconds earlier and impacted on the far side of the valley in a useless explosion. The young Taliban fighter stood there in the dust and the smoke, watching them go, and Reaper met his eyes across the distance and saw her own reflection. Young, hard, shaped by war into something that would never fit back into the civilian world. She wondered if he would survive long enough to regret the life he had chosen. She wondered the same thing about herself. Marcus Webb regained consciousness on the flight back to base, stared at her with eyes that had seen too much in too short a time. "You saved my life." Reaper checked his vitals, adjusted the IV line the crew chief had started. "That is literally my job description, Captain. Those girls of mine, twin daughters, I have never even held them." His voice was thick with morphine and emotion. "I was going to die in that riverbed without ever holding my own children." She met his eyes, saw the naked gratitude there, felt something twist in her chest. This was the part they did not prepare you for in training. The medical procedures, the tactical insertions, the weapons handling, all of that had protocols and procedures and steps you could memorize. But no manual existed for how to process the weight of another human being's life, saved or lost, and what that did to the quiet places inside your head where you still tried to be a person instead of just a weapon system with a call sign. "You are going to hold them," Reaper said. "You are going to get on a plane, fly home, walk into your house, and pick up both of those little girls. That is what happens next. You understand me?" Marcus nodded, tears cutting clean tracks through the dust on his face. "Yes, ma'am, I understand." 3 days later, Captain Jessica Kaine stood at attention in front of the base commander while he read the citation for her Air Force Cross. Third highest military decoration, awarded for extraordinary heroism in combat. 43 successful rescues. 0 operators lost on her watch. The commander pinned the medal to her uniform, shook her hand with the firm grip of a man who had sent too many warriors into harm's way, and appreciated the ones who brought them back. The assembled personnel applauded. Marcus Webb was there on crutches, his wife and twin daughters having flown out to see him. The girls were 3 months old, tiny and perfect. He caught Reaper's eye, mouthed the words, "Thank you." She nodded once, maintaining the stoic expression expected of a decorated combat veteran. Inside, the voice that never stopped calculating was already running the numbers. 43 rescues, 80% of CROs washed out in training. Average combat deployment was 12 months. She had been downrange for 24 months with only a 2-week break in between. The human body could sustain that operational tempo for a finite period before stress fractures appeared in the structure. Psychological, physiological, it made no difference. Breakdown was inevitable. It was just a question of when. 5 months later, the when arrived with all the subtlety of an IED. The official diagnosis was post-traumatic stress disorder, typed neatly on VA paperwork by a psychiatrist who had never heard a shot fired in anger. Panic attacks, hypervigilance, intrusive memories, difficulty sleeping, emotional numbing. The standard checklist of symptoms that happen when the human nervous system stayed in combat mode long after the shooting stopped. Medical discharge, honorable, with full benefits. The paperwork came through in 6 weeks. Captain Jessica Kaine, Combat Rescue Officer, callsign Reaper, ceased to exist in any official capacity. In her place stood Emily Carson, civilian contractor, logistics coordinator for military cargo operations. Unremarkable, forgettable. Perfect cover for someone who needed to disappear while still staying close to the world she understood. The truth, of course, was more complicated. The PTSD was real, the panic attacks were real, but the discharge was theater, carefully orchestrated by people whose names did not appear on organizational charts. They had approached her 3 weeks before the official diagnosis, men in suits with the kind of faces that gave away nothing. They worked for an office that technically did not exist, running operations that would never appear in any historical record. They had a problem. Several problems, actually, all related to the uncomfortable fact that someone inside the military-industrial complex was making money by creating situations that required dramatic rescues and heroic sacrifices. Someone was trafficking weapons, intelligence, and people through military supply chains. Someone was very good at covering their tracks. They needed an operator embedded in that supply chain. Someone with legitimate combat credentials who could be officially discharged and transition into contractor work without raising suspicion. Someone who could spend months building cover, gaining trust, moving through the network until they identified the key players. Someone who would not break when things went sideways, because things always went sideways eventually. They needed someone like Reaper. She had listened to their pitch in a sterile conference room that smelled like recycled air and old coffee, had reviewed the files they showed her, faces of operators who had died in circumstances that looked like bad luck but felt like something else, had asked exactly one question. If I do this and it goes bad, who comes to get me? The lead suit, a man named Garrett with colonel's insignia and eyes like a calculator, had met her gaze without blinking. Nobody. You are on your own. That is the deal. She had signed the papers that same afternoon. Now, 18 months into the operation, Emily Carson sat in the cargo hold of a C-130 Hercules transport plane, wearing civilian contractor credentials on a lanyard around her neck, watching 18 other souls go about their business with the casual assumption that this was just another routine cargo flight. Logistics, they called it. Moving supplies and personnel from point A to point B. The lifeblood of military operations worldwide. Most of it was legitimate, but buried in the mountain of legitimate cargo and passenger manifests were the channels that moved the illegal goods. Weapons sold to countries under embargo. Intelligence leaked to the highest bidder. And occasionally people who had become inconvenient, shipped to places where inconvenient people ceased to be problems. Emily Carson had spent those 18 months building a reputation as reliable, competent, and most importantly, incurious. She did her job, filed her paperwork, asked no questions about cargo. She was not paid to question. She had cultivated relationships with other contractors, logistics personnel, even some of the military liaisons who oversaw the transport operations. She smiled at appropriate times, made small talk about weather and sports, presented herself as exactly what her papers claimed she was. And slowly, carefully, she had identified the nodes in the network, the people who moved the wrong cargo, the manifests that did not quite add up, the flights that went to places not listed on official schedules. This flight was one of them. December 2024, 3 days before Christmas. Officially, they were moving medical supplies and mail from Ramstein Air Base in Germany to Camp Lemonnier in Djibouti. Standard humanitarian and logistical support. But Emily Carson had seen the manifests, had noted the extra pallets loaded in the dead of night, had identified 3 passengers who were not listed on any official roster. She knew with the certainty that came from 18 months of careful observation that this plane was carrying something someone very much wanted to keep hidden, which was why she had activated the emergency beacon embedded in a dental filling in her upper left molar. A simple clench of her jaw in a specific pattern sent a burst transmission to a satellite overhead. GPS coordinates, her biometric signature, and a simple code that meant the operation was moving to the next phase. Somewhere, people were scrambling to provide support, but the lead suit's words echoed in her memory. If it goes bad, nobody comes to get you. She sat near the cargo netting in the rear section of the aircraft, tablet in hand, reviewing manifests she had memorized days ago. The act of reading them again provided cover for her real activity, which was cataloging every person in the hold. 18 total, 6 crew members in flight suits, 4 logistics personnel in contractor khakis, 8 passengers in various states of civilian and military dress. One of those passengers was a man in his late 60s, weathered face, gray hair cut military short, reading a dog-eared copy of Gates of Fire. His posture gave him away. Ramrod's straight spine, even in the uncomfortable web seats. Boots worn but maintained. The way he scanned the cabin with eyes that cataloged exits and potential threats without seeming to look at anything in particular. This was a warrior, retired maybe, but the training never left. Their eyes met briefly. Something passed between them. That wordless recognition that happened when 2 people who had seen the elephant acknowledged each other. He returned to his book. She returned to her tablet. The moment passed. Another passenger was the loadmaster, a man named Marcus Webb, mid-30s, built like someone who spent time in the gym, but not obsessively. He moved through the cargo hold with the easy competence of someone who had done this job 1,000 times. But Emily Carson had watched him for the past 2 hours and noticed things. The way he maintained perfect balance even when the aircraft hit turbulence. The way his weight stayed on the balls of his feet. The subtle readiness in his posture that suggested muscles coiled to explode into action. This was not a loadmaster, or rather, he was a loadmaster the same way she was a logistics coordinator. Someone playing a role. A third passenger, a woman in her late 30s, Asian features, credentials identifying her as Dr. Sarah Chen, aid worker with an NGO. She sat reading a medical journal, occasionally making notes. But Emily had observed the way her eyes tracked movement in the cabin, the way she positioned herself with sight lines to both exits, the way her hands never quite relaxed. Another player on the board. The game was bigger than she had realized. That should have worried her. Instead, she felt something almost like relief. She was not alone out here, after all. The question was whether the other players were on her side or working for someone else entirely. The C-130's engines droned on, 4 Allison turboprops pushing them through the sky at 300 knots. They had been airborne for 3 hours and 17 minutes. Cruising altitude 35,000 feet. Rote took them over international waters, following established air corridors to avoid complications with territorial boundaries. Standard procedure. Boring, routine, safe. The first indication that safe was an illusion came when the aircraft's pitch changed. Subtle but unmistakable to anyone who had logged serious flight hours. Emily felt it in her inner ear before her conscious mind registered the shift. Slight deceleration, banking to the left, maybe 2 degrees. Not dramatic enough to alarm the civilians, but wrong. She looked up from her tablet, eyes finding the nearest window. Clear sky. No weather that would justify course correction. She checked her watch. 3 hours, 18 minutes. They were not scheduled for any navigational changes. The loadmaster Marcus Webb had noticed too. She saw it in the way his posture shifted. Subtle tension entering his frame. His eyes found hers across the cargo hold. A question passed between them silently. She gave the tiniest shake of her head. I do not know. Then the world exploded. The emergency exit door blew inward with a decompression blast that tore through the cargo hold like the wrath of God. The sound was a physical thing. Pressure and noise combined into a force that slapped everyone against their seats. Oxygen masks dropped from overhead panels. Loose items became projectiles. A coffee cup shattered against the bulkhead. Papers swirled in a brief tornado before being sucked toward the breach. Through the screaming wind and chaos, figures in black tactical gear fast roped into the aircraft with practiced precision. 1, 2, 5, 8, 12. They hit the deck with boots that looked designed to kick indoors and moved with the coordinated efficiency of a team that had done this before. Their weapons were up immediately, muzzles tracking across the cabin with professional discipline. No wasted motion. No hesitation. These were not amateurs playing dress-up. These were operators, possibly military trained, definitely experienced. The lead man stood 6'3", built like violence compressed into human form. A jagged scar ran from his left ear down to his collarbone. The kind of wound that came from being too close when something sharp and angry wanted to paint the world red. He carried a Zastava M70 rifle, Serbian-made, reliable, common in Eastern European military circles. When he spoke, his voice cut through the wind noise like a blade. Everyone on the ground, now. The command was not a request. It was physics. Gravity and authority combined. People dropped to their knees, hands rising automatically. Survival instinct overriding pride. The elderly couple, the young technician with his laptop. Dr. Sarah Chen, moving slowly, hands visible. Marcus Webb, face carefully neutral. The 6 crew members being herded out of the cockpit at gunpoint. Emily Carson let herself be pulled from her seat by one of the hijackers, a wiry man with prison tattoos crawling up his neck like angry vines. She made her movements clumsy, terrified. Exactly what a civilian contractor would do when armed men violated the sanctuary of a flying aluminum tube. She fell when he shoved her, hit the deck, plating hard enough to drive the air from her lungs in a very convincing gasp. Her hands went up, fingers splayed in surrender. Inside her head, the combat calculator that never slept was already running equations. 12 hostile miles, 4 potential exits, currently 3 compromised by hijackers at entry points. Weapons visible include 7 Zastava rifles, at least 4 sidearms, unknown number of additional weapons in the cargo. 18 friendlies, condition unknown, tactical capability probably 0 except for maybe Webb and Chen. Time until fighters scramble, estimated 20 to 30 minutes if the beacon transmission was received. The scarred leader paced between the kneeling hostages like a wolf evaluating sheep, his rifle never wavering. My name is Anton Volkov. You do not need to remember it because you will not live long enough for it to matter unless I get what I came for. His English was accented but clear, educated. This was not some desperate refugee turned pirate. This was a professional criminal, probably former military given his bearing and tactical discipline. This aircraft is carrying $80 million in uncut diamonds. I know this because I have very good intelligence. You will tell me where they are, and you will tell me quickly, or people start dying. Diamonds. Emily Carson filed that information away for later analysis. Her intelligence had suggested weapons or laundered money, not gemstones. Either her information was incomplete, or Anton was being lied to by his sources. Both options created complications. The aircraft commander, Captain Jerry Holland, was forced to his knees near the cockpit door. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead where someone had introduced his face to a rifle butt with more enthusiasm than strictly necessary. He was 52 years old, Air Force Reserve, had flown cargo missions for 30 years without incident. This was supposed to be a milk run before retirement. Instead, he was staring down the barrel of a rifle held by a man who looked very comfortable with the idea of murder. I do not know anything about diamonds, Holland said, voice steady despite the circumstances. This is a routine supply flight, medical equipment, mail, spare parts, nothing valuable. Anton's response was immediate and educational. He drove the steel toe of his boot into Holland's ribs with calculated force, enough to hurt badly, but not enough to cause serious internal damage. The captain folded over, gasping. Anton grabbed a fistful of his flight suit, hauled him back upright. Let me be very clear about how this works. I ask questions. You provide answers. If the answers are lies, people suffer. If the answers continue to be lies, people die. This is very simple mathematics. He released Holland, let him collapse back to his knees, then turned his attention to the rest of the hostages. 80 million in diamonds. Someone on this plane knows where they are. Someone is responsible for their transport. I will find that person. The question is how many bodies I have to make before that happens. One of Anton's men, a massive figure, easily 6'5" and 300 pounds of prison yard muscle, stepped forward. They would probably call him Tank or Boulder or some other nickname that referenced his improbable size. He grabbed the young technician, a kid maybe 25 years old, who looked like he fixed computers for the base exchange and whose biggest life decision had probably been which video game to buy. Tank lifted him one-handed by the throat, slammed him against the curved wall of the cargo hold hard enough to leave a dent in the aluminum. The sound echoed like a drum. The kid's glasses went askew. His feet kicked uselessly a foot off the deck. Please, the kid managed to choke out. I just fixed computers. I do not know anything about diamonds. I am just trying to get home for Christmas. Christmas. Emily had forgotten. December 23rd, 2024. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. She wondered who would miss her if this ended badly. Probably nobody. She had burned most of her bridges when she went into this deep cover operation. Friends stopped calling when you never answered. Family learned not to expect you at holidays. The job consumed everything if you let it. And she had let it because the alternative was going back to a civilian life that would feel like wearing a costume that did not fit. Anton made a gesture. Tank released the technician, who dropped to the deck gasping and crying. The massive hijacker turned his attention to the older man, the one who had been reading Gates of Fire. He hauled him upright with less violence but equal disregard for comfort. You, Anton said, studying him with interest. You move like military. What is your story, old man? The older man met Anton's gaze without flinching, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded respect in another life. Sergeant Major retired Frank Bridger, 32 years, United States Army Rangers, 2 tours Southeast Asia, 1 Grenada, 1 Panama. I am flying home after visiting my son in Germany. I do not know anything about your diamonds, but I know a few things about men like you. You are making a mistake that is going to cost you everything." Anton smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Enlighten me, Sergeant Major. What mistake am I making?" "You are assuming everyone on this plane is helpless." Frank Bridger's voice was calm, almost conversational. "You are assuming your intelligence is good, and you are assuming you have time. All three assumptions are wrong." The slap came fast, Anton's open hand catching Bridger across the face with a crack that made several hostages flinch. The old ranger's head snapped to the side. Blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. But he did not fall. He turned his head back slowly, met Anton's eyes again, and smiled with red teeth. "That the best you got, son? I have been hit harder by my grandkids." Anton's face darkened. This time he used the rifle stock, a vicious upward strike that caught Bridger under the jaw and sent him sprawling. The sergeant major went down hard, blood spattering the deck. Several passengers gasped. Emily Carson forced herself to stay in character, whimpering, cowering, playing the terrified civilian even as her hands unconsciously tensed in a way that would let her move from kneeling to combat stance in under a second if necessary. "Not yet," the calculator in her head said. "Not yet. The timing is wrong. Too many variables. Too many civilians in the line of fire." Anton stood over Bridger's fallen form, breathing hard, anger radiating from him like heat from a furnace. This was the flaw in his tactical discipline. He was professional until someone challenged him. Then the emotional control slipped and mistakes became possible. Emily cataloged that weakness for future use. "Anyone else want to be a hero?" Anton addressed the cabin at large. Silence answered him, broken only by quiet sobbing and the drone of the engines. He nodded, satisfied. "Good. We are going to search this aircraft, every container, every compartment, every pocket. The diamonds are here. We will find them. And if anyone interferes, I will start with the children." There were no children on the flight, but the threat landed anyway. This was a man who understood psychological warfare. The cabin descended into tense silence as Anton's team began their systematic search, pulling open cargo containers, dumping the contents, tearing through carefully packed supplies with the efficiency of people who had done this before. Medical equipment scattered across the deck, bandages unrolled, bottles of saline solution rolled into corners. The violence of the search felt personal, even though it was purely tactical. Emily Carson sat with her back against the bulkhead, hands still raised, watching everything through eyes that appeared glazed with fear but missed nothing. She tracked the movements of each hijacker, noting which ones were disciplined and which ones were sloppy. She observed their spacing, their fields of fire, the way they communicated with hand signals that suggested military training. She noted that one of them kept checking his watch, nervous, probably worried about response time from fighters or base security. She noted that another had a slight tremor in his left hand, either nerves or early-stage neurological condition. She noted that the one they called Tank favored his right knee, weight shifting unconsciously to compensate for old injury. All of this information went into the calculator. 12 hostiles, but effectively 9 combat effective if she could exploit the weaknesses. 4 exits, but only 1 viable if she needed to move fast. Weapons accessible if she could create the right opening. Time working against them, which meant Anton would become more desperate, which meant more violence, which meant the window for action was narrowing. She caught Sergeant Major Bridger's eye. He was sitting up now, blood still dripping from his split lip, but his gaze was sharp and focused. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw recognition begin to dawn in his eyes. The way she sat, the way her breathing remained controlled despite the apparent fear, the way her hands, though raised in surrender, were positioned in a way that would allow instant action. When she had shifted position, her weight distribution had changed subtly. Professional, tactical. He had seen combat operators before. He knew what they looked like even out of uniform. He gave her the smallest nod. So small, anyone else would have missed it. A nod that said, "I see you, I know what you are. When you move, I will back your play." She returned the nod, equally subtle. Not yet, but soon. The search continued for another 10 minutes before one of Anton's team, the tech specialist, pulled out a ruggedized laptop and began working on something. She was younger than the others, maybe late 20s, with purple hair shaved on one side and multiple facial piercings that looked out of place on someone running tactical operations. When she spoke, her accent was Eastern European, Russian, or Ukrainian, or somewhere in that region. I am into their system. There is heavy encryption on one manifest file. Military grade. This is serious protection. Anton crossed to her in 3 quick strides. Crack it. Give me 5 minutes. Her fingers danced across the keyboard with the kind of speed that came from growing up digital, from spending more time in networks than in physical reality. Emily felt the situation shifting, pieces on the board moving in ways she had not anticipated. If that encrypted file was what she thought it was, if it contained the real manifest for this flight, things were about to become very complicated very quickly. Her cover was solid. She had spent 18 months building it. But solid cover only worked until someone with the right access started pulling threads. The purple-haired tech specialist made a small sound of triumph. Got it. Manifest shows. Wait. Her voice trailed off as she read whatever was on her screen. Her face went pale. This does not make sense. What does it say? Anton demanded, leaning over her shoulder. She read slowly as if speaking the words might change their meaning. Operation Thanatos, Black Operations Transport, Package Designation Reaper, CRO embedded, Intelligence on Ouroboros Network, Target Identification Anton Volkov. The cargo hold went silent. Even the engine noise seemed to fade. Every eye turned to the tech specialist's screen, then to Anton, then began scanning the hostages with new understanding. Someone on this plane was not what they appeared to be. Someone was an operator embedded specifically to target Anton Volkov. Someone called Reaper. Anton's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, disbelief, rage. Then something colder settled over his features, the look of a predator that had just realized the prey might have teeth. Find Reaper, now. His team began moving through the hostages with new purpose, roughly checking identification, pulling people to their feet, searching for anything that might indicate military training. The wiry one with the neck tattoos grabbed Emily Carson by her arm, yanked her upright, began patting her down with hands that were professional but not gentle. She let herself be handled, maintaining the terrified civilian act, even as she calculated exactly how many pounds of pressure it would take to collapse his trachea if she struck with the heel of her palm at the correct angle. Not yet, the calculator said. Not yet. Sergeant Major Frank Bridger was hauled to his feet again, Anton studying him with renewed interest. You move like military. You talk like military. Maybe you are Reaper, old man. Maybe this is your operation. Bridger met his gaze steadily, blood still staining his teeth. Son, I was running operations when you were still learning to walk. If I was Reaper, you would already be dead, and you would have died confused about what happened. Anton studied him for another long moment, then made a decision. He pulled his sidearm, a CZ-75, pressed the muzzle against Bridger's forehead. Then you will not mind dying to prove your point. The hammer came back with a click that sounded very loud in the sudden silence. Emily Carson made a decision of her own. The time for hiding was over. The muzzle of the CZ-75 pistol pressed against Frank Bridger's forehead with enough pressure to leave a circular impression in the skin. The old ranger did not blink, did not flinch. His eyes remained locked on Anton Volkov's face with the kind of steady calm that only came from staring at death so many times that the two of you were on first-name basis. In Vietnam, Frank had walked point through jungle that wanted to kill him, had cleared tunnels where enemy soldiers waited in darkness with knives and hatred, had carried wounded brothers through rice paddies while machine gun fire turned the water into foam. Death was an old companion. Not a friend exactly, but familiar enough that the introduction was unnecessary. Anton's finger tightened on the trigger. The hammer was already cocked. Approximately 4 pounds of pressure separated Frank Bridger from whatever waited on the other side of breathing. The silence in the cargo hold stretched like piano wire pulled to breaking point. Every hostage held their breath. The wind noise from the compromised emergency door seemed to fade. Even the drone of the 4 Allison turboprops became background static. In that moment, the entire universe contracted to the space between 2 men, 1 gun, and a question that would be answered in the next 3 seconds. Emily Carson made her move. She was sitting 15 feet behind Anton, back against the bulkhead, hands raised in surrender. the picture of terrified compliance. The hijacker with the neck tattoos had searched her 90 seconds ago and found nothing but a logistics coordinator with soft hands and fear in her eyes. He had moved on to the next hostage. Nobody was watching her. That was the first mistake. The second mistake was assuming that soft hands meant soft skills. Jessica Kaine, combat rescue officer, callsign Reaper, came off the deck like a coiled spring released. 0 to combat speed in the time it took a heart to beat twice. Her body moved with the muscle memory of 2 years in the CRO pipeline, where they taught you that hesitation killed and decisiveness saved lives. She covered the distance to the nearest hijacker in 4 strides, silent as smoke, while everyone's attention was focused on the drama playing out at gunpoint. The hijacker was one of Anton's team, mid-30s, Slavic features, holding a Zastava rifle at low ready while watching the confrontation. He never saw her coming. Reaper's right hand shot out, fingers rigid, and struck him precisely in the soft tissue of his throat just below the Adam's apple. The trachea collapsed partially under the impact. His eyes went wide with shock and the sudden inability to breathe. The rifle started to come up in panicked response. She trapped the weapon against his body with her left hand, stepped inside his reach, and drove her right elbow up into his jaw with the kind of force that rearranged dental work. His head snapped back. Consciousness departed. She caught him as he fell, lowered him silently to the deck, relieved him of his rifle in a movement so smooth it looked like the weapon had simply transferred itself to her hands. The entire evolution took 4 seconds. Anton heard the sound of a body hitting the deck and spun, bringing his pistol around. Frank Bridger, veteran of more close calls than he could count, dropped flat the instant the gun left his forehead. The old ranger hit the deck with his arms covering his head, getting small, getting out of the line of fire, with reactions that his body remembered even if his knees complained about the sudden movement. Reaper already had the Zastava rifle up and aimed. Her stance was textbook. Weight balanced, elbows in, sight picture perfect. The muscle memory of thousands of rounds fired in training took over. She could have shot Anton, center mass, double tap. He would have been dead before his brain registered the sound. But 12 hostiles remained in the cargo hold, and opening fire would turn this into a massacre. Innocent people, civilians who came to work this morning thinking about Christmas and family and the mundane details of ordinary life, would die in the crossfire. That outcome was unacceptable. So instead of shooting, she spoke. Her voice came out flat, cold, carrying the authority of someone who had commanded life and death decisions in places most people could not find on a map. Anton Volkov, drop the weapon. Tell your team to stand down. This ends one of 2 ways. Either everyone walks off this plane alive, or I put you down and fight my way through the rest. Your choice. Make it fast. The cargo hold erupted into chaos. Anton's team reacted with the trained efficiency of professional soldiers. Weapons came up, muzzles tracking toward Reaper, fingers moving to triggers. But they hesitated, because their boss was in the line of fire, because shooting at her meant shooting through him, and because, despite their training and experience, despite the numerical advantage and superior firepower, they could see something in her eyes that gave them pause. The look of someone who had already done the math, calculated the acceptable losses, and decided that dying was just another tactical option if it accomplished the mission. Anton saw it too, saw the absoluteness in her stance, the readiness, the complete lack of fear that came from accepting death as a possible outcome and moving forward anyway. He had seen that look before in Grozny, in men who fought for the Russian military during the Chechen Wars. Believers and fanatics had that look. So did the most dangerous operators, the ones who survived because they were willing to go further than anyone else. "You are Reaper," he said. Not a question, a statement of fact. Captain Jessica Kaine, United States Air Force Combat Rescue Officer, 24th Special Tactics Squadron. She kept the rifle trained on his center mass, finger resting on the trigger guard, ready to move that last half-inch if necessary. "I have 17 combat deployments, 43 operators rescued, 26 confirmed kills. Would you like to be number 27? Anton's mind worked fast, calculating odds, weighing options. His team had the numbers. But she had position and the kind of training that made numbers less relevant. More importantly, she had something his intelligence had not predicted. Presence, the intangible quality that separated competent operators from the ones who changed outcomes through sheer force of will. The diamonds, he said slowly. There are no diamonds. This whole flight was a trap for me. Not a trap, bait. Reaper's voice remained steady despite the adrenaline singing in her veins. You have been moving weapons and intelligence through military supply chains for 3 years. The diamonds were fiction, created specifically to make you commit to a high-value target. This plane, this flight. You took the bait exactly as predicted. The purple-haired tech specialist, still seated at her laptop, made a small sound. Boss, she is telling the truth. I am pulling up more files. Operation Thanatos, Multi-Agency Task Force, NSA, CIA, Air Force OSI. They have been tracking the entire network. They know about the weapons shipments to Syria, the intelligence sold to the Chinese, the bribes to logistics officers. They know everything? Anton's face hardened into something carved from stone. If they know everything, why am I not already arrested? Why the elaborate setup? Because knowing is not the same as proving in court. A new voice entered the conversation. Marcus Webb, the loadmaster who was not really a loadmaster, stood slowly from his position near the cargo netting. His hands came up in a gesture of peace, but his body language shifted subtly. The casual contractor persona fell away like a discarded coat. What remained was something harder, more focused. They needed you to commit to an actionable offense on record. Hijacking, hostage-taking, acts that would hold up in an international tribunal. And they needed to identify your team, which you have helpfully brought along. Anton's eyes flicked to Webb, processing this new information. Who are you? Chief Petty Officer Ryan Cooper, United States Navy, SEAL Team 3. Webb, or rather Cooper, let the statement hang in the air. I would say it is a pleasure, but that would be a lie. Dr. Sarah Chen, the aid worker who moved with too much tactical awareness, rose to her feet as well. When she spoke, her voice had lost the soft academic tone and gained an edge that suggested briefing rooms and classified operations. Special Agent Diana Torres, Central Intelligence Agency, Directorate of Operations. Mr. Volkov, you are in violation of so many federal statutes that I literally cannot list them all in the time we have available. You should surrender now, while surrender remains an option. Anton looked between the 3 revealed operators, then back to Reaper, and laughed. The sound held no humor. You think I am afraid of American courts? You think prison worries me? I have survived wars. I have survived Russian prisons where the guards sell you to other inmates for cigarettes. I will survive whatever you think you can do to me. Maybe. Reaper's rifle never wavered. But your team will not. Drop the weapon. Tell them to stand down. Last chance. For a long moment, Anton seemed to consider it. His finger remained on the trigger of his CZ-75. His eyes calculated distances, angles, possibilities. Then something shifted in his expression. A decision made. No, I think not. You are one woman with a rifle. My team is 12 operators with superior firepower. You are good, I can see that. But you are not good enough to win this fight. And you will not shoot because innocents will die in the crossfire. You care too much about saving lives. It is in your file. It is who you are. He was right, that was the problem. Reaper had read the tactical situation the same way. If this turned into a gunfight, the civilians would be caught in the middle. The elderly couple, the young technician, people who should never have been here, should never have been touched by this world of shadows and violence. She could probably kill Anton and 3 or 4 of his team before they brought her down. But the rest would execute hostages out of rage or revenge or simple tactical necessity. The math did not work, not if her primary mission was protecting lives. Frank Bridger, still lying flat on the deck where he had dropped when Anton's gun moved, spoke without lifting his head. His voice was quiet, but it carried. Captain Kaine, you have done your job. You identified the target. You got him to reveal his team. You have witnesses and evidence. Mission success. Stand down before this becomes a bloodbath. It was the right tactical call, the smart play, the one that kept the most people alive. Reaper knew it, but knowing and accepting were different countries separated by a border made of pride, and the stubborn refusal to quit that had carried her through 2 years of training that broke 80% of candidates. Then the situation changed again. The aircraft lurched hard to the left, banking at an angle that sent unsecured items sliding across the deck. Everyone stumbled. Reaper kept her feet through muscle memory and balance training, but her sight picture wavered. Anton grabbed a cargo strap to steady himself. His team spread out automatically, maintaining their spacing even in chaos. Training under pressure. They were good. Damn them, they were very good. A voice crackled over the aircraft's intercom system. Captain Jerry Holland, the pilot, speaking from the cockpit with careful control despite whatever was happening up front. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. We are being intercepted by two F-16 Fighting Falcons from the 480th Fighter Squadron out of Spangdahlem Air Base. They are directing us to alter course to Ramstein Air Base in Germany. We will be on the ground in approximately 15 minutes. Anton's face went from stone to something darker. He keyed a radio on his vest, spoke rapidly in Russian. Reaper caught enough of it to understand. He was asking about the fighters, about response time, about how the Americans had scrambled jets so quickly. The answer came back in a female voice, stressed but professional. The purple-haired tech specialist translated without being asked, her voice shaking slightly. They say the beacon signal has been transmitting for 40 minutes. NATO air defense picked it up within 10 minutes. The fighters were already airborne on patrol. They diverted to intercept. 40 minutes, since shortly after the hijacking began, which meant someone on this plane had activated a distress signal. Reaper had not done it. Her beacon was passive, designed to be activated only in specific circumstances. So who had triggered the alert that brought the cavalry? She scanned the hostages, looking for tells, for signs of hidden technology or covert action. Saw nothing obvious. Anton saw the same problem from the opposite direction. His carefully planned hijacking was collapsing. The fighters meant combat air patrol, which meant the aircraft was being tracked, which meant any attempt to divert to a different destination would be met with force. Hijacked planes that deviated from directed courses had a tendency to be shot down these days. Too many memories of September 11th. Too many scenarios where letting a compromised aircraft reach a populated area was the worst outcome. The F-16s on their wing were not there to escort. They were there to enforce compliance or, if necessary, to ensure the plane never reached anywhere it could do harm. New deal, Anton said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade through fabric. We land at Ramstein. My team and I disappear into the crowd during ground operations. Anyone tries to stop us, hostages die. You want to save lives, Captain Kaine? You let us walk away. That is the price. No. Ryan Cooper stepped forward, hands still visible, but body language shifting into something aggressive. That is not how this works. You hijacked a United States military aircraft. You assaulted crew and passengers. You are not walking away from this. Anton turned his pistol toward Cooper. I think you misunderstand who has the power here, Navy SEAL. I have 12 armed operators. You have empty hands and conviction. Conviction is admirable, but it stops bullets very poorly. That was when the lights went out. Complete darkness slammed down like a physical force. The cabin lights, the emergency strips, even the glow from the tech specialist's laptop all died simultaneously. The only illumination came from the windows, pale sunlight filtering through, creating shadows and uncertain shapes, but nothing clear enough to identify targets. Someone had killed the electrical system, deliberately, tactically. Chaos erupted in the darkness, shouting in multiple languages, the sound of bodies moving. A rifle fired once, twice, the muzzle flash creating freeze-frame images of the cargo hold like lightning illuminating a storm. Someone screamed, metal hit metal, the scuffle of boots on deck plating, more shouting, another gunshot, this one followed by a cry of pain. Reaper moved through the chaos like a ghost given flesh in malicious intent. She had dropped flat the instant the lights died, making herself small, rolling away from her last known position. Night vision would have been useful, but she did not have any. What she had was training in disorientation scenarios, in fighting blind, in using sound and spatial awareness to map her environment. The CRO pipeline included combat in zero visibility conditions. They locked you in rooms with no light, and attackers in full protective gear, and told you to survive. Those who panicked, washed out. Those who learned to fight with senses beyond sight, graduated. She heard someone moving to her left, heavy footsteps, the unmistakable sound of tank's massive bulk. Stayed still, let him pass, heard him collide with someone, a hostage from the sound of the collision and the frightened cry. She filed that position away mentally. Civilian, left side, approximately 10 feet from her current location. Avoid that angle for shooting. More movement, lighter, faster. One of Anton's team moving tactically, probably trying to reach the tech specialist and her equipment. Reaper tracked the sound, waited for the right moment, then lashed out with her boot, connected with something that felt like a knee. The hijacker went down with a curse in Russian. She was on him in half a second, hands finding his throat in the darkness, thumb and fingers pressing into the carotid arteries with precise force. He struggled for maybe 5 seconds, then went limp. She left him breathing but unconscious, took his sidearm, a Makarov pistol, added it to her arsenal. The emergency lighting kicked back on, battery-powered, independent of the main electrical system, designed to activate automatically after power loss. The cargo hold illuminated in harsh red glow that turned everything into a scene from a nightmare. Shapes resolved into people. Reaper's eyes adjusted instantly, training taking over, cataloging the new tactical situation in the second and a half it took for everyone else to recover from the transition. 3 of Anton's team were down. The one Reaper had choked into unconsciousness. Another with a broken nose and blood streaming down his face, courtesy of Ryan Cooper, who stood over him with the man's own rifle. A third sitting against the bulkhead, holding his knee and moaning. The hostages had scattered to the edges of the cargo hold, trying to make themselves small, trying to become invisible. Smart. Survival instinct overriding panic. But the remaining 9 hijackers were regrouping, and Anton Volkov stood in the center of it all with his pistol trained not on Reaper or Cooper or Torres, but on the elderly couple who had been trying to get home for Christmas. The husband was 70 if he was a day, the wife maybe 68. They huddled together in their seats, holding hands, faces pale with fear. Anton's gun was pointed directly at the old woman's head. "Nobody moves," Anton said quietly, "or Grandma dies messy." The cargo hold froze. Reaper had her rifle up, aimed at Anton, but the shot was impossible. He was using the couple as cover, positioning himself so that any bullet meant to kill him would have to go through them first. Classic hostage shield tactic. Effective. Brutal. The kind of move that worked because it exploited the one thing that separated operators from terrorists. Operators cared about collateral damage. "Here is the new situation," Anton continued, his voice carrying the calm of a man who had regained control of his chaos. "The lights going out was clever. I assume Captain Kaine or one of her friends has training in circuit breakers and electrical systems. But it bought you maybe 30 seconds. We still have superior numbers. We still have hostages. And now I am very motivated to ensure that someone pays for the inconvenience. So, new deal, again." He pressed the gun harder against the old woman's temple. She whimpered. Her husband tried to put himself between her and the weapon, but Anton kicked him away casually. The old man fell hard, hitting his head on the deck edge. Blood appeared. The woman cried out. Frank Bridger started to move forward, but 2 of Anton's men had guns on him now. He froze. "The deal is this," Anton said. "You 3, the operators hiding among sheep, you surrender your weapons. You allow my team to secure you. We land at Ramstein. We all walk off this plane together. You go to your debriefing. I go to wherever I go. And these nice people, these civilians, who should never have been involved in your games, they get to live. That is the deal. You have 10 seconds to decide." Reaper calculated. 9 armed hostiles remaining. Herself, Cooper, and Torres against them. Better odds than before, but still not good enough. Not with civilians in the line of fire. Not with an old woman 1 trigger pull from death. She looked at Cooper, saw him running the same math, coming to the same conclusion. Looked at Torres. The CIA agent's face was stone, but her eyes said it all. "We are out of good options." 5 seconds, Anton said. Frank Bridger spoke up from his position on the deck, still bleeding from where Anton had hit him with the rifle stock. "Captain Kaine, stand down. That is an order from a superior officer." Reaper almost smiled despite the situation. "You are retired, Sergeant Major. You do not have authority to give me orders." "Then take it as advice from someone who has been in more no-win scenarios than you have been alive." Frank's voice was gentle. "You did good. You identified the enemy. You got some of them. but you cannot save everyone. You can only save who you can save. Put down the rifle. Live to fight another day. The old warrior was right. Reaper knew it. The tactical situation was untenable. Anton had position, numbers, and willingness to kill innocents. She had righteousness and skill, and not enough of either to change the outcome. Sometimes the mission failed. Sometimes bad guys won the battle, even if they ultimately lost the war. That was the reality of operations conducted in the real world, where Murphy's Law was less a guideline and more a physical constant. 3 seconds, Anton said. The hammer on his CZ-75 pulled back with a click that sounded obscenely loud. Reaper lowered her rifle. Okay, you win this round. But before she could set the weapon down, before Anton could savor his victory, the satellite phone on his vest erupted with sound, someone calling him on a priority channel. He grabbed it with his free hand, never moving the gun from the old woman's head, keyed the connection. What? The voice on the other end was female, American accent, professional tone. Reaper could not make out the words, but she could hear the cadence. Military. Official. Conveying information that made Anton's face go through a series of expressions. Confusion. Disbelief. Something that might have been fear if men like Anton Volkov admitted to fear. He lowered the phone, stared at Reaper with new understanding dawning in his eyes. You clever bitch. There are no diamonds. There is no Ouroboros network investigation. That was all fiction. Cover story. You are not after my organization. He paused, the pieces clicking together. You are after someone else. Someone who sent me here. Someone who used me as a test. For you. Reaper said nothing, but her silence was confirmation enough. Anton laughed, and this time the sound carried genuine amusement, mixed with the kind of respect that came from recognizing a worthy opponent. The voice on the phone, American woman, military background. She says her name is Captain Elena Kaine. She says she is your sister. She says if you want to see her alive, you surrender now, or she detonates the device. The cargo hold spun. Reaper's entire world contracted to those words. Elena, her sister, her twin sister who was supposed to be dead, killed in Syria 3 years ago during a black operations extraction that went sideways. They had held a memorial service, folded flag, 21-gun salute, the whole ceremony. Her mother had died 6 months later, heart attack the doctor said, but Reaper knew it was grief. Losing a daughter broke something in her mother that medicine could not fix. You are lying, Rapper said, but her voice cracked on the words. The professional operator facade developed over years of training fractured. My sister is dead. Is she? Anton pulled up something on his phone, turned the screen toward Reaper. Video footage. A woman in Russian military flight suit standing next to an Su-57 Felon fighter, 5th-generation stealth aircraft. The kind of equipment Moscow did not share with just anyone. The woman turned toward the camera. Even through the grainy resolution and distance, even with 3 years of aging and hardship written on her features, the face was unmistakably familiar. The same face Reaper saw in the mirror. Twin sisters, identical down to the small scar on the left eyebrow from a childhood bicycle accident. Elena, Kaine, alive, in Russia, wearing their uniform. The video was time-stamped, 72 hours ago. What device? Reaper forced the words out through a throat that felt like it was closing. What is she talking about? Anton smiled, and it was not a nice expression. Your sister, it seems, is no longer playing for your team. She works for people who do not appreciate American interference in their operations. And she placed insurance on this plane. A little gift, just in case you succeeded in capturing me. He gestured to one of his men. Show her. The hijacker moved to a cargo container in the rear section, one that Reaper had seen loaded during pre-flight, but had not flagged as suspicious. Standard military shipping container, proper seals, documentation that looked legitimate. The hijacker popped the latches, opened it. Inside, nested among packing foam, was a device that made Reaper's blood turn to ice water. She had seen enough ordnance in her career to recognize a bomb when she saw one. This was professional work. Military-grade explosives, probably Semtex or C4 based on the color and consistency. Enough to turn the C-130 into falling debris scattered across several square miles. Digital timer currently reading zeros. But next to it, a receiver unit with a small LED light blinking green. Armed, waiting for remote detonation signal. Your sister is very thorough, Anton said conversationally. She told me about the device before I even launched this operation. Insurance, she called it. If I succeed, I take the diamonds and she gets her cut. If I fail and get captured, she has leverage. She can detonate remotely anytime she wishes. And she will unless you do exactly what she tells you. Ryan Cooper moved forward, careful to keep his hands visible. Let me see the device. I have explosives training. Maybe I can disarm it. Maybe you can, Anton agreed. Maybe you trigger the anti-tampering mechanism and we all die in a fireball. Maybe you want to take that chance with all these civilians on board. Maybe you are feeling lucky, Navy SEAL. Cooper stopped. He was not feeling lucky. Nobody was. Reaper stared at the video on Anton's phone. Elena, her sister, her twin, the person she had been closest to in the entire world. They had enlisted together, gone through basic training together, competed and encouraged each other through every step of their respective pipelines. Elena had gone fighter pilot track, F-22 Raptors, while Reaper had chosen the special operations route. Different paths, but same commitment, same values, same loyalty to the country they served. Or so Reaper had thought. If Elena was alive and working for Russian intelligence, that loyalty had shifted in ways Reaper could not begin to process. Put me through to her, Reaper said quietly. Let me talk to my sister. Anton considered, then shrugged. Why not? He switched the phone to speaker mode, keyed in a number. The connection went through after 2 rings. A voice answered. Female, American accent. But harder than Reaper remembered, colder, shaped by whatever experiences had filled the 3 years since her supposed death. Hello, Jessica. It has been a while. Hearing her sister's voice after 3 years of grief and mourning was like being hit in the chest with a rifle butt. Reaper could not breathe, could not think, could only stand there while her entire understanding of reality rearranged itself into new and terrible configurations. Lena, she managed finally. The childhood nickname. They told me you were dead. They said the F-22 went down over Syria. They said there were no survivors. They lied. Elena's voice carried no emotion, flat, effectless. Or rather, they believed a lie I helped create. I am very much alive, Jess, and I need you to listen carefully because I am only going to say this once. Surrender to Anton. Let him secure you. Land at Ramstein. Walk off that plane as his prisoner. Do this and everyone lives. Refuse and I detonate the divage. 300 pounds of Semtex turns that C-130 into aluminum confetti. Your choice. You have 60 seconds. Reaper closed her eyes. Tactical breathing. 4 count in, 4 count hold, 4 count out. The technique that kept fighter pilots conscious during high-G maneuvers. The technique that kept operators functional during stress that should break the human nervous system. When she opened her eyes again, the world had not changed, but her understanding of it had crystallized into hard certainty. Her sister was alive. Her sister had placed a bomb on this aircraft. Her sister was working for enemy intelligence. Nothing about that made sense. Everything about it demanded explanation. But explanations would have to wait. Right now, 18 lives hung in the balance. 18 people who had no part in whatever game was being played, who should never have been touched by this world of shadows and betrayals. 45 seconds, Elena's voice came through the speaker. Frank Bridger caught Reaper's eye, shook his head slowly. Do not do it, the gesture said. Do not surrender. We will find another way. But Reaper had run the calculations. There was no other way. Not one that kept everyone breathing. Anton had the hostages, Elena had the detonator, and Reaper had training and skill and conviction, but none of that mattered against a remote bomb trigger in the hands of someone willing to push the button. 30 seconds. Okay, Reaper said. The word felt like swallowing broken glass. I surrender. Tell Anton how you want this done. Elena's voice shifted, carrying instructions with the precision of someone who had thought this through in detail. You, the SEAL, and the CIA agent disarm yourselves completely. Weapons on the deck. Then you kneel, hands behind your heads. Anton's team will secure you with zip ties. You land at Ramstein. During the chaos of ground response, Anton and his people disappear. You remain with the hostages. Everyone lives. The device stays armed until we are clear. Once we are safe, I disarm it remotely. Simple. Clean. Nobody has to die today. And then what? Reaper asked. After Anton escapes? After you disarm the bomb? What happens to you and me? Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, something in her voice had softened. Just a fraction, just enough to suggest that somewhere under the hard veneer, the sister Reaper remembered still existed. Then we talk, face to face, sister to sister, and I tell you everything. Why I am alive, why I let everyone think I was dead, and why the country we swore to serve is not what we thought it was. 15 seconds, Anton interjected. Make your decision, Captain Kaine. Reaper looked at Ryan Cooper, at Diana Torres, at Frank Bridger, at the 18 faces of people whose only crime was being on the wrong flight at the wrong time. She thought about the 43 operators she had rescued over 2 years of combat deployments. Thought about Marcus Webb and his twin daughters he had never held. Thought about the oath she had taken to defend and protect. Thought about what her instructors had drilled into her during endless training evolutions. The mission is bigger than you. The mission is all that matters. But those instructors had also taught her that the mission was people, that every tactical decision came down to a simple question. Who lives? Who dies? And if you could make the call that kept the most people breathing, that was the right call, even if it cost you everything. She set down her rifle, removed the Makarov pistol from her belt, placed both weapons on the deck. Then she knelt, hands behind her head, and waited for Anton's men to secure her. Cooper watched her for 3 long seconds, then did the same. His expression said, "This is wrong, this is a mistake, we should fight." But he followed her lead because that was what operators did. They trusted their teammates to make the hard calls. Torres was last. The CIA agent's face showed nothing but her hands trembled slightly as she disarmed herself. Fear, maybe, or rage at the situation, or both. Anton's team moved in with zip ties and professionally conducted searches that found the small blade Reaper had taped to her ankle and the ceramic knife Cooper had hidden in his boot and the compact pistol Torres had in a concealed holster at the small of her back. They were thorough, efficient, not gentle, but they did not inflict unnecessary violence. Just secured the 3 operators and stepped back. "Very good," Elena's voice said through the speaker. 15 minutes to Ramstein. Anton, you know the extraction plan. I will see you in Berlin. As for you, sister mine, welcome to the game. The real game. The one where nobody tells you the truth. The line went dead. Anton pocketed his phone, smiled at Reaper with something that might have been respect. Your sister is impressive, terrifying, but impressive. If it is any consolation, I think she really does care about keeping you alive. She could have simply blown the plane and eliminated all of us. But she gave you the out. That means something. Reaper said nothing. What was there to say? That her entire understanding of reality had been demolished in the space of 10 minutes. That her sister, her twin, her best friend, and fiercest rival and closest ally had betrayed everything they believed in? Or had she? What if Elena was telling the truth? What if there were things about their country, their service, their sacrifices that Reaper did not know? The questions would have to wait. Right now, the C-130 was descending. Through the windows, she could see the approach lights of Ramstein Air Base growing larger. The F-16s on their wing maintained formation, shepherding them in like wolves guarding sheep. On the ground, emergency vehicles were already moving. Security forces, fire trucks, ambulances, command staff, all of them preparing for a hijacked aircraft landing, all of them expecting violence and chaos, none of them knowing that the real threat was already walking away. The landing gear deployed with a hydraulic whine. Captain Jerry Holland brought them in smooth despite everything. The wheels touched tarmac with barely a bump. Thrust reversers engaged. The turboprops screamed as they slowed. Anton's team maintained positions, weapons ready, eyes scanning. Frank Bridger sat against the bulkhead, bleeding but conscious. When his eyes met Reaper's, he gave the smallest nod. You did the right thing, you saved lives. The aircraft stopped. Outside, sirens wailed. Anton keyed his radio, spoke rapid Russian. The tech specialist responded with coordinates and timing. Extraction plan to the second. Anton walked to where Reaper knelt. He squatted to eye level, studied her face. Your sister said you are the best. 43 saves, perfect record, impressive. 44 now, Reaper said quietly. Everyone on this plane is walking off alive. Does it? Anton's smile was sad. You think surrender is victory because nobody died? Your mission was to capture me. Instead, I walk free. Your sister gave me the tools. And you will explain to your superiors how a dead pilot orchestrated your defeat. He paused. Which hurts more? The deaths you prevented or the victory you gave away? Reaper met his eyes. I will sleep fine tonight knowing 18 people go home to their families. Will you? Anton considered, then stood. You are a true believer. I used to believe in things. Country, duty, honor. Then I learned those are just words powerful people use. He turned to his team, issued commands in Russian. They moved toward the emergency exit. The tech specialist paused at the exit, looked back at Reaper with an expression hard to read. Then she was gone. The cargo hold fell silent. Frank Bridger moved first, helping the civilians. Everyone stay calm. When security forces board, follow instructions exactly. Do not make sudden movements. Nods, whispered acknowledgments. Ryan Cooper worked over to Reaper. That was the right call, you know that. I know, Reaper said, but knowing did not make it easier. The cargo hold door opened. Security forces poured in. On the ground, hands where we can see them. The choreography of crisis response. 20 minutes before someone recognized the 3 operators were not hostages. Another 10 before they were cut free and escorted off the aircraft. The tarmac was organized chaos. Emergency vehicles, security perimeters, medical personnel, and in the middle a man in Air Force colonel's uniform with intelligence insignia. He approached Reaper, studied her with assessment. Captain Kaine, he said, his voice was dry, Midwest accent, the tone of someone who had spent too long in briefing rooms and not enough time seeing sunlight. Colonel Richard Garrett, Air Force Office of Special Investigations. We need to debrief, now. Reaper nodded. Exhaustion was starting to set in, the adrenaline crash that always followed combat operations. Her ribs hurt where she had hit the deck. Her hands were raw from the zip ties. But operational debriefs happened immediately after action while details were fresh. That was protocol. Yes, sir. I need to report mission failure. Anton Volkov escaped with his entire team. My intelligence indicated weapons trafficking, but the actual target appears to have been more complex than briefed. Garrett's expression did not change, but something in his eyes suggested she had just confirmed suspicions he already held. We will discuss that in a secure location, but first, I need to ask you a direct question, Captain. Do you have a sister, twin sister, named Elena? The question hit like a physical blow. Reaper's exhaustion vanished, replaced by the sharp focus that came from hearing the one thing she both desperately needed to discuss and absolutely dreaded talking about. Yes, sir. Captain Elena Kaine, F-22 Raptor pilot, listed as killed in action, Syria 3 years ago. Why are you asking? Garrett pulled out a tablet, entered a security code, pulled up a file, turned the screen toward Reaper. Video footage. The same clip Anton had shown her, but higher resolution, more detailed. Elena in Russian flight suit, standing next to the Su-57, timestamp confirmed, 72 hours ago, and there was more. Additional footage. Elena walking through what looked like Red Square in Moscow. Elena meeting with men in Russian military uniforms. Elena climbing into the cockpit of a fighter jet that should never have been accessible to an American pilot, alive or dead. Your sister is alive, Garrett said quietly, and she appears to be working with Russian intelligence. Specifically, a woman we have been tracking for 5 years. Former KGB, current independent operator, goes by the designation Phoenix. Real name Valentina Volkov. Anton's mother, incidentally. This was not a simple hijacking, Captain. This was a message from your sister to you. Reaper stared at the footage, her mind trying to process information that did not fit any framework she possessed for understanding the world. Elena was alive. Elena was in Russia. Elena was working with the enemy. Elena had orchestrated this entire operation, the hijacking, the bomb, the forced surrender, all of it designed not to steal diamonds or move weapons, but to do something else entirely. To contact her sister. I need to see her, Reaper said. I need to talk to Elena, find out what happened, why she is alive, why she is doing this. That is exactly what we are going to discuss, Garrett said. He gestured toward a black SUV waiting near the flight line. Secure facility, classified briefing, and Captain, what I am about to tell you is going to change everything you think you know about your service, your country, and your sister's death. He paused. or rather what we all thought was her death. Reaper climbed into the SUV, her world already fragmenting into pieces she did not know how to reassemble. Ryan Cooper and Diana Torres were directed to separate vehicles, different debriefs, different chains of command. The operation had fractured, and now they were being compartmentalized. As the vehicle pulled away, Reaper caught one last glimpse of the C-130. Forensic teams were already boarding, processing the scene, looking for the point Elena had mentioned. The device would be disarmed by experts. The aircraft would be cleared, eventually. But nothing would clear the questions burning in Reaper's mind. Elena, her sister, her twin, the person who was supposed to be dead, but was somehow alive and working for the enemy. None of it made sense. All of it demanded answers. The SUV drove through the gates of Ramstein, heading toward whatever secure facility held the secrets that would explain how the dead could rise and the loyal could betray. In the back seat, Captain Jessica Kaine, callsign Reaper, prepared herself for whatever came next. She had survived 2 years of brutal training, had completed 43 combat rescues, had just talked down a hijacking that could have ended in massacre. She could survive learning the truth about her sister. The question was whether the truth would survive her response to it. The secure facility buried 3 levels beneath Ramstein Air Base smelled like recycled air and secrets that had been locked away too long. Colonel Richard Garrett led Captain Jessica Kaine through corridors painted institutional gray, past security checkpoints where armed guards checked credentials with the kind of thoroughness that suggested they had shot people for having the wrong badge. The fluorescent lights flickered in a rhythm that felt designed to induce headaches. Or maybe that was just the exhaustion and adrenaline crash catching up. Reaper had been awake for 26 hours. Her body ached from being thrown around the cargo hold. Her wrists still bore marks from the zip ties, but her mind remained sharp, focused on the one question that mattered more than physical discomfort. Why was her sister alive and working for Russian intelligence? They entered a briefing room that could have been anywhere in the military-industrial complex. Conference table bolted to the floor, chairs that were designed for function rather than comfort, walls that were probably soundproof and definitely reinforced against electronic surveillance. A large monitor dominated one wall, currently dark. Garrett gestured to a chair. Reaper sat. He remained standing, studying her with eyes that had assessed thousands of personnel files and probably knew more about her service record than she remembered herself. "Coffee?" he asked. "You look like you need it." "Information," Reaper said. "I need that more." Garrett nodded, the gesture of a man who appreciated directness. He pulled a tablet from a secure case, entered a password that was probably longer than most people's wedding vows, waited for biometric confirmation. The monitor on the wall came to life, displaying a classified file header that made it clear this briefing was about to violate enough security protocols to put both of them in federal prison if anyone outside a very small circle ever found out. "What I am about to show you is compartmented information," Garrett said. "Special access program, need to know only. As of 20 minutes ago, you officially have need to know. But Captain, once you see this, you cannot unsee it. Your understanding of your service, your sister's death, and why you were recruited for Operation Thanatos will change fundamentally. Are you prepared for that?" Reaper met his gaze without blinking. "My sister just orchestrated a hijacking that put 18 civilians at risk to deliver a message to me. I am already operating in a reality I do not recognize. Show me whatever you have. It cannot make things stranger than they already are." "Do not be so sure." Garrett tapped the tablet. The monitor displayed a map of Syria dated 3 years earlier. Red markers indicated known hostile positions. Blue markers showed friendly forces. A green line traced a route from the Turkish border deep into territory controlled by forces loyal to the Assad regime. Operation Blackbird, January 2023. Your sister's F-22 was part of a 4-aircraft escort mission for a combat search and rescue operation. An agency asset had been compromised in Damascus. High-value target, critical intelligence. Lives at stake if we did not extract. Standard mission parameters. Except it was not standard. The map zoomed in on a specific location. A compound outside Aleppo. Satellite imagery showed buildings, vehicles, defensive positions. Garrett continued, his voice carrying the flat affect of someone reciting information he had reviewed too many times. "The asset we were extracting was not just any intelligence officer. Dr. Valentina Volkov, formerly KGB, currently operating as an independent contractor. She had been our source inside Russian weapons programs for 5 years, feeding us information on their next-generation fighter development, their stealth technology, their electronic warfare capabilities. Invaluable intelligence. But Moscow discovered the leak. They sent a Spetsnaz kill team. We had maybe 6 hours to get her out or she was dead. Reaper's hands clenched on the table edge. The name Volkov was not a coincidence. Anton's mother, Elena, had mentioned her, Phoenix. You sent my sister to extract a Russian intelligence officer who was selling out her own country? We sent a combat rescue team supported by air superiority fighters to extract an asset who had saved American lives by preventing technological surprises that could have shifted the balance of power in multiple theaters. Garrett's tone was defensive. Valentina Volkov gave us advance warning on the S-400 air defense systems, on the Su-57 capabilities, on cyber warfare tools that would have compromised our networks. Yes, we sent your sister, because the mission was critical, and because Captain Elena Kaine was the best F-22 pilot in theater. The monitor shifted to cockpit footage, night vision, grainy green and black, the view from Elena's heads-up display. Reaper recognized her sister's flying immediately. Smooth, aggressive, the kind of precision that came from thousands of hours pushing the envelope. The F-22 was doing what it did best, owning the squad, making enemy air defenses irrelevant through stealth and speed, and the kind of technology that cost more than most small nations' defense budgets. The extraction team went in, Garrett continued. HH-60 Pavehawk, same platform you have worked from dozens of times. 4-man combat rescue crew. They got Valentina out. But Syrian air defense, tipped off by someone, launched missiles. Multiple SA-11 systems, coordinated fire, professional targeting. The kind of response you get when someone with access to intelligence networks warns the enemy exactly when and where to look. The cockpit footage showed missile launches, bright plumes rising from the ground like angry fingers reaching for the sky. Elena's F-22 maneuvered, chaff and flares deploying, electronic countermeasures painting the spectrum with false targets. 3 of the 4 F-22s evaded successfully, but the 4th, Elena's wingman, took a proximity hit. Not a direct strike, but close enough that shrapnel shredded control surfaces and hydraulic lines. The aircraft began spinning, falling, pilot ejecting in a burst of rocket motor fire. Captain Marcus Chen, Garrett said quietly. Good pilot, 2 kids, wife pregnant with their 3rd. He survived the ejection, landed in hostile territory, and that is when everything went to hell. The monitor showed infrared footage from a drone orbiting overhead. Thermal signatures showed Chen on the ground, injured, his parachute draped over rocks. Syrian forces closing in. And then, inexplicably, one of the F-22s breaking formation, diving toward the surface. Not in a strafing run, but in an uncontrolled descent that looked wrong, looked deliberate in the wrongest possible way. Elena saw Chen go down, Garrett said. She called for the rescue bird to divert, but the Pavehawk had Valentina on board and was already taking ground fire. The call came from higher up the chain. Continue the extraction. Chen was declared expendable. Do not risk the helicopter and the high-value asset for one downed pilot. Reaper felt something cold settle in her chest. They ordered her to leave her wingman. They ordered her to maintain air superiority while the rescue bird extracted the primary objective, which in military terms meant yes. Leave Chen, say Valentina, accept the loss of one pilot as the price of saving an intelligence asset worth her weight in strategic advantage. The infrared footage showed what happened next. Elena's F-22 did not maintain air superiority. It dove, accelerated, pushed past safe parameters and into the kind of flight profile that would either end in a successful rescue or a smoking crater. She put the stealth fighter into a guns run, engaging the Syrian forces closing on Chen with 20mm cannon fire that turned men into mist and vehicles into scrap metal. Then she overflew Chen's position, afterburners lit, daring anyone with a surface-to-air missile to take the shot. They took the shot. Multiple systems, all firing at once. A wall of missiles rising to meet the most advanced fighter in the American inventory, being flown by a pilot who had just violated direct orders to save her wingman. Elena took 3 proximity hits, Garrett said. His voice had gone quiet, almost reverent. Any one of them should have destroyed the aircraft. But F-22s are tough, and your sister was tougher. She kept it flying long enough to give Chen time. The pavehawk turned around, picked him up under fire, got him out, saved his life. But Elena's aircraft was dying. She ejected over hostile territory and then, officially, she disappeared. The monitor froze on the last frame of thermal footage. A parachute descending, then nothing. Static. The kind of blank screen that meant either technical failure or deliberate erasure. Search and rescue went in, Garrett continued. Found the crash site, found her parachute, found evidence of a firefight. Blood, shell casings. But no body, no pilot. We assumed she had been killed and her remains taken by hostile forces. That happens sometimes in that part of the world. Bodies become propaganda tools or bargaining chips. Reaper's voice was barely a whisper. You left her. We tried. Garrett's face showed genuine pain. For 72 hours, we had every asset in the theater looking. Drones, satellite coverage, signals intelligence, human sources. Nothing. And then Moscow made it very clear through back channels that any further American military activity in that area would be considered an act of war. They had surface-to-air missiles bracketing the whole region. They had interceptors in the air. They were daring us to try another rescue, and the White House decided that risking a wider conflict for one pilot, already presumed dead, was unacceptable. So you declared her killed in action. The words tasted like ashes. Held a memorial service. Gave my mother a folded flag, let us bury an empty coffin, while my sister was alive and in enemy hands. We believed she was dead. Garrett's tone was defensive, but his eyes said he knew how hollow that sounded. Every indicator suggested she had not survived. And even if she had, Captain, you know the realities. 72 hours is the window. After that, the odds of successful rescue drop to nearly zero. After a week, you are recovering remains, not rescuing personnel. Elena was listed as killed in action because that was the most likely outcome. Until 3 months ago, when we learned otherwise. He tapped the tablet again. New footage appeared, recent, high definition, shot from a concealed camera in what looked like a Moscow cafe. A woman sat alone at a table drinking coffee, reading a newspaper. When she looked up, her face was unmistakable. Elena Kaine. Older, harder, but alive. Very much alive. Human intelligence asset captured this, Garrett said. Pure chance encounter. Our source was meeting a contact and happened to notice her at another table. Recognized her from training photos. Confirmed her identity through 3 separate channels before we believed it. Captain Elena Kaine, United States Air Force, reported killed in action, was alive and apparently living freely in Moscow. Reaper stared at her sister's face on the screen. 3 years. 3 years of grief and guilt and questions about whether Elena's death could have been prevented. 3 years of her mother slowly dying from a broken heart. 3 years of carrying the weight of survival when her twin had not. All of it based on a lie or a mistake, or whatever terminology made it palatable for the people who made decisions that left operators to die in foreign countries. What happened to her? Reaper asked. Between the ejection and that cafe? We do not know. Garrett's admission carried the frustration of an intelligence officer facing a gap in knowledge. We have theories. Best assessment is that she was captured by Russian forces, interrogated, and then turned. They are very good at that. Months of isolation, psychological manipulation, showing her evidence that her country abandoned her, that we left her to die while saving a Russian defector. They would have exploited every doubt, every fear, every moment of pain, and eventually they broke her, or convinced her. The end result is the same. He pulled up more files, surveillance photos, Elena meeting with known Russian intelligence officers, Elena at military installations, Elena, in one particularly damning image, wearing a Russian Air Force flight suit and standing next to an Su-57 fighter that Moscow did not let just anyone touch. She is working for them, Garrett said, providing intelligence on American systems, tactics, personnel, everything she learned in her years of service. She is now using it against us. The hijacking today was just one operation in a pattern we have been tracking for 8 months. She has been involved in arms deals, intelligence transfers, and at least 3 operations designed to compromise American personnel. Reaper felt her world continuing to fracture. The sister she remembered would never betray her oath, her country, her values. Elena had been fierce, competitive, aggressive, but loyal to the core. The person in these photos looked like Elena, but the actions described were those of a stranger or an enemy. Why did she orchestrate the hijacking? Reaper asked. If she wanted to kill me or compromise the operation, she had easier ways. Why the elaborate setup with Anton Volkov? Garrett was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that suggested this was the part of the briefing he had been dreading. Because she wants to meet with you, face to face, sister to sister. She has been sending messages through channels, cryptic at first, then more direct. She claims she has information. Evidence of something she calls Project Ouroboros, a program inside the Pentagon that deliberately sacrifices special operations personnel for political and financial gain. The name hit Reaper like a physical blow. Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail, the symbol of self-destruction. What is Project Ouroboros? We do not know if it exists. Garrett's face was stone. It could be disinformation, a Russian intelligence operation designed to sow doubt and discord in our special operations community. Or it could be something worse. Elena claims she has proof. Recordings, documents, financial records. She says the operation in Syria, the one where she was shot down, was not bad luck or enemy action. She says it was deliberate. Someone wanted that mission to fail, wanted Valentina Volkov dead, and wanted the pilots escorting the extraction to die as acceptable losses. Reaper's mind was racing, processing implications that spread like cracks in ice. If that is true, if someone in our own government deliberately set up that mission to fail, then Elena was not abandoned by accident. She was sacrificed on purpose. That is what she claims. Garrett's voice was carefully neutral. But Captain, you need to understand something. Everything we know about Russian intelligence operations suggests this is exactly the kind of story they would construct. Take a real tragedy, the loss of a pilot in combat, and twist it into a conspiracy theory. Add just enough truth to make it believable. Feed it to someone who has every reason to believe, someone who was hurt by the outcome, and then use that person as a weapon against their former allies. You think she is being manipulated? I think she is being used, whether she knows it or not. Garrett sat down across from Reaper, leaned forward, voice dropping. Captain Kaine, your sister contacted us through back channels. She wants to meet, in person, on neutral ground. She says she will bring proof of Project Ouroboros. She says she wants to come home, but only if you are the one she meets with. Only if you hear her out. She specifically requested you. The request made a terrible kind of sense. Elena would not trust the intelligence apparatus that had declared her dead, would not trust the chain of command that had ordered her to abandon her wingman. But she might possibly trust her twin sister, the person who had known her longer than anyone, the person who had shared a womb, a childhood, a dream of serving something bigger than themselves. Where? Reaper asked. When? Berlin. 3 days from now. Neutral territory. She has diplomatic cover through the Russian embassy but has agreed to meet in a public location. The Tiergarten, the park in the center of the city. She will come alone. She wants you to come alone. Just two sisters talking. That is a trap. The assessment was automatic, tactical thinking overriding emotional response. She will have backup. Russian intelligence will have the park locked down. The moment I show up, I am compromised. Almost certainly, Garrett agreed. Which is why this is not an order, Captain. This is a request. And it comes with full acknowledgement that we would be sending you into an extremely high-risk situation with minimal support. If things go wrong, if the Russians decide to grab you, we will try to get you back. But Berlin is not friendly territory for aggressive rescue operations. You could be in Russian custody before we even knew you were taken. Reaper thought about her sister's voice on the phone. The hardness in it, yes, but also something underneath. Pain, maybe, or regret. The sound of someone who had traveled too far down a dark road and was looking for a way back. I will go, Reaper said. The decision was instinct, the same instinct that had driven 43 successful rescues. You did not leave people behind, not if there was even a chance of bringing them home. Garrett nodded slowly as if he had expected that answer but hoped for a different one. Then we have 72 hours to prepare you. New identity, cover story, equipment. You will be traveling as a civilian, a tourist. No military identification, no weapons, no official status. If you are caught, we will disavow knowledge. The story will be that you went AWOL, possibly suffering from PTSD, related to the hijacking. You will be on your own. I am always on my own, Reaper said. That is what combat rescue officers do. We go into situations everyone else considers impossible and we bring people back. My sister needs rescue. From the Russians, from herself, from whatever they have done to her. So I am going to Berlin. I am going to meet her. And I am going to bring her home or die trying. Garrett stood, offered his hand. Reaper shook it. His grip was firm, the handshake of a man who had sent too many operators into danger and knew the weight of that responsibility. Good luck, Captain. I hope you are right about your sister. I hope she can be saved. But if you find out otherwise, if she really has turned, you need to be prepared to make hard choices. I have been making hard choices since the day I joined, Reaper said. This is just one more. 72 hours later, Dr. Jennifer Mills stepped off a train at Berlin Hauptbahnhof with a small suitcase and the nervous energy of a tourist excited to see a foreign city. The disguise was minimal. Hair dye had turned Reaper's dark brown locks into mousy blonde. Contact lenses changed her eye color from hazel to blue. A slight change in posture, a different way of walking. Clothes that were civilian casual rather than tactical practical. The transformation was more about behavior than appearance. Dr. Mills was an academic, a professor of aerospace engineering from MIT, attending a conference on advanced propulsion systems. She had hotel reservations, conference credentials, even a prepared presentation on theoretical applications of scramjet technology. The cover was solid, deep enough to withstand casual scrutiny. The Tiergarten was Berlin's equivalent of Central Park, hundreds of acres of trees and paths and monuments in the heart of the city. On a Thursday afternoon in December, it was populated by joggers, dog walkers, tourists taking photos of the Victory Column. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that in their midst, two women were about to have a conversation that might reshape their understanding of loyalty and betrayal. Reaper arrived at the designated meeting point 30 minutes early, a bench near the Neuer See, the lake in the park center. She sat, pulled out a paperback book as cover, and waited while her eyes scanned the environment with the trained observation of someone who had survived by noticing threats before they became lethal. Three men in business suits walking too purposefully. Possible surveillance. Woman with a stroller who had passed the same location twice. Possible backup. Van parked with a view of the bench. Occupants not visible. Definite threat. The Russians had the area saturated. At least a dozen personnel that Reaper could identify, probably more she could not. If this went bad, she would be surrounded and captured within seconds. The smart move was to abort, walk away, report the situation, and let intelligence professionals handle it. But smart moves did not bring sisters home from the dead. Elena appeared exactly on time, walking along the path with the confidence of someone who owned the ground she walked on. She wore civilian clothes, jeans, and a leather jacket, but moved with military precision. When their eyes met across 50 feet of park pathway, something passed between them. Recognition, grief, anger, love. All the complicated emotions that came from being twins, from sharing everything from conception forward, from being two halves of a whole that had been violently separated. Elena sat down on the bench, leaving 2 feet of space between them, close enough to talk quietly, far enough to maintain the pretense that they were strangers who happened to share a seat. For a long moment, neither spoke. They just sat there, two sisters who had not seen each other in 3 years, who had each thought the other lost forever, trying to find words for the impossible. You look different, Elena said finally. Blonde does not suit you. You look dead, Reaper replied. That suited you even less. Elena smiled, brief and sad. I suppose I deserved that. She pulled a small device from her pocket, activated it. The electromagnetic jammer would create a bubble of privacy, preventing any listening devices from picking up their conversation. Professional tradecraft. The kind of thing Russian intelligence taught its assets. Thank you for coming. I know you were ordered to, but thank you for actually showing up. I was not ordered. I volunteered. Reaper kept her voice level, conversational, two friends catching up. They told me you were alive, showed me evidence you were working for Russian intelligence, suggested this was probably a trap. I came anyway, because you are my sister, and because I need to hear from your own mouth why you betrayed everything we swore to defend. Elena flinched at the word betrayed. Is that what they told you? That I turned traitor? Sold out my country for Russian money and promises? They showed me evidence, photos of you with Russian intelligence officers, you wearing their uniform, flying their aircraft. The hijacking you orchestrated put American personnel and civilians at risk. What would you call that? Survival. Elena's voice went hard. When your own country leaves you to die in a Syrian hellhole, when they abandon you to save a Russian defector, when they declare you dead and move on without a second thought, you do what you have to do to stay alive. I called that survival. Maybe you have a different word for it. Reaper turned to face her sister directly, studying the changes 3 years had written on familiar features. Tell me what happened after you ejected, after we thought you died. Elena was quiet for a moment, staring across the lake. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of memories too heavy to bear alone. I landed in hostile territory, compound fracture of my left leg, dislocated shoulder, but I was alive and I had my survival radio. I called for extraction. Over and over. 72 hours, Jess. 3 days of hiding in rocks while Syrian forces searched for me. 3 days of bleeding and pain and listening to jets overhead that never came lower. Do you know what that does to you? Hearing your own aircraft, knowing rescue is maybe 30 minutes away, and they just fly past? They were looking for you, Reaper said. Garrett showed me the files. They searched. Not hard enough, Elena's voice cracked. Because on day 4, it was not Americans who found me. It was Spetsnaz, Russian special forces. And you want to know the strange part? They did not kill me. They patched me up, set my leg, gave me antibiotics for the infection that was already starting. And then they told me why. She pulled out a phone, older model, probably secure, pulled up a video file, handed it to Reaper. Watch this. Then tell me about betrayal. The video showed a conference room, Pentagon based on the architecture. 3 men in civilian clothes, faces Reaper did not recognize, but the quality of their suits and the weight of their bearing screamed senior leadership. The audio was clear, obviously recorded by someone in the room or through sophisticated surveillance. Operation Blackbird is a failure. One of the men was speaking. Gray hair, hard eyes, voice like gravel. Valentina Volkov is compromised. Moscow knows she has been feeding us intelligence. If we extract her, they will know for certain we had a source inside their weapons programs. That burns every other asset we have in Russian defense industry. A second man, younger, responded, We have a team en route, combat rescue in progress, F-22 escort. We pull her out, debrief her, relocate her, standard protocol. No, the first man again. We let the Syrians have her. Russian intelligence will handle the cleanup. Valentina knows the risks. She knew what she signed up for. As for the rescue team and the escort, if they succeed, we have a political disaster. If they fail, well, accidents happen in combat zones. The third man, silent until now, leaned forward. You are suggesting we deliberately allow American personnel to be killed or captured to protect our intelligence network? I am suggesting we make a strategic calculation. The gray-haired man's voice was ice. 4 pilots and a rescue crew against the entire Russian penetration network we have spent 10 years building. The math is clear. We let them fail. We mourn the loss. We classify the details. And we continue operations that serve the greater good. The video ended. Reaper sat frozen, the phone heavy in her hands. The implications were staggering. If this was real, if those men had actually ordered American forces to be abandoned for the sake of protecting intelligence operations, then everything she believed about the chain of command was a lie. Where did you get this? Reaper's voice was barely a whisper. From the people who saved my life when my own country wanted me dead. Elena took the phone back. The Russians intercepted that communication. That is how they knew exactly when and where to position their air defenses. That is how they knew to shoot down my wingman, to force the choice between extraction and rescue. That whole mission was compromised from the top. And when I was captured, they showed me the truth. Showed me that I was not a warrior serving my country. I was a pawn being sacrificed to protect people who saw me as expendable. Reaper's world spun. That could be fabricated. Russian intelligence is expert at creating false evidence. I thought that too. Elena pulled out a small drive. This contains the original files, unedited, with metadata proving when and where they were recorded. with voice analysis matching the speakers to senior Pentagon officials whose identities I will not mention here because we are in public and I am not suicidal. You can have your people verify it. They will find it is real. She pressed the drive into Reaper's hand. That is Project Ouroboros, Jess, a program that creates situations where American special operations personnel are deliberately put into impossible scenarios. When they die, it justifies increased defense spending. When they survive against odds, it creates heroes that boost recruitment and public support. Either way, the machine wins. The operators are just fuel for a system that profits from their sacrifice. Reaper clutched the drive, her tactical mind fighting against the emotional tsunami trying to overwhelm rational thought. If this is true, why not go public? Why not expose it through legitimate channels? Because the people running Ouroboros control those channels. Elena's laugh was bitter. You think the media will investigate? The same media that depends on Pentagon access for their stories? You think Congress will act? Half of them are on defense contractor payrolls. The system protects itself, Jess. The only way to fight it is from outside. By working for Russian intelligence? By becoming the enemy? By becoming independent. Elena stood, hands in pockets, looking down at her sister. I do not work for the Russians. I work with them when our interests align. I sell intelligence to the highest bidder. I use the skills our country gave me to survive in a world that tried to kill me. You call that betrayal. I call it waking up. Reaper stood as well, facing her twin. And the hijacking? Putting civilians at risk? That was waking up? That was getting your attention, making you see that the world is not what you think it is. Elena's voice softened. I need you to understand, Jess. Everything we were taught, everything we believed about duty and honor and serving something greater, it is a lie. We are weapons, tools. And when we break or become inconvenient, we get thrown away. I am trying to save you from learning that the hard way. By turning me into a traitor like you? The words hung between them, sharp and cutting. Elena's face hardened. I am trying to show you the truth. What you do with it is your choice, but know this. Project Ouroboros is real. It is active, and you, Captain Jessica Kaine, are on their list. The hijacking was not random. It was a test. They wanted to see how you would respond to an impossible situation. Whether you would sacrifice yourself, whether you would let civilians die, whether you would make the hard call. You passed their test, which means you are now valuable enough to use and expendable enough to sacrifice when the time comes. Reaper felt cold settle into her bones. You are lying. Am I? Elena pulled out her phone again, showed another file, a list of names. Reaper recognized 3 of them, operators she had trained with. Good people, all listed as killed in action in the past 18 months. These are Ouroboros targets, people who were too good, too independent, too likely to question orders. They died in training accidents, friendly fire incidents, missions that went wrong for no clear reason. You are on the next list, Jess. The hijacking was your entrance exam. They are already planning how to use you. Stop. Reaper's voice came out harder than intended. Stop trying to manipulate me. I do not know if Project Ouroboros is real. I do not know if you are telling the truth or if you have been brainwashed by Russian intelligence into believing their version of events. But I know this. You orchestrated an attack on American personnel. You put my life at risk. You put innocent people in danger. Whatever your justification, those are not the actions of someone I can trust. Elena's expression shifted through several emotions. Pain, anger, resignation. Finally, she nodded. You are right, I did those things. And I would do them again if it meant waking you up to the reality of what you are serving. But I see I was wrong. You are still asleep, still believing in the fairy tale of noble service and justified sacrifice. She started to walk away, then stop, turn back. When they burn you, when they set you up to fail and declare you expendable, remember this conversation. Remember that your sister tried to save you. And remember that the drive in your hand contains the proof you will need to understand why the people you trust are the ones who will destroy you. She walked away, melting into the crowd of tourists and locals enjoying the park. Within seconds, she was gone. The Russian surveillance that had bracketed the area began to withdraw as well, professional and coordinated. They had gotten what they came for. The meeting had happened. The information had been transferred. Now they would disappear back into the shadows of a city that had seen more than its share of intelligence operations. Reaper stood alone on the path, holding a data drive that might contain evidence of treason at the highest levels, or might be the most sophisticated disinformation operation she had ever encountered. Her sister was alive. Her sister was possibly a traitor. Her sister claimed to be trying to save her. None of it made sense. All of it demanded investigation. She activated the emergency signal embedded in her watch. Within 10 minutes, a car pulled up. Not American Embassy, that would be too obvious. Private security contractor with ties to the intelligence community. They would get her out of Berlin, back to somewhere she could verify the contents of the drive, try to separate truth from manipulation. As the car drove through Berlin streets, Reaper thought about her sister's final words. When they burn you. Not if. When. As though Elena knew something Reaper did not. As though the betrayal was not a possibility, but an inevitability waiting to happen. The drive felt heavy in her pocket, heavy with the weight of secrets that could reshape her understanding of everything or prove to be nothing but elaborate lies designed to sow discord and doubt. She did not know which outcome she feared more. The safe house was in a suburb east of Berlin. Colonel Garrett was waiting with two technical specialists whose credentials suggested they spent their lives analyzing digital information. Reaper handed over the drive. My sister gave me this. Claims it contains proof of Project Ouroboros. I need to know if it is real. The senior specialist took the drive carefully. We will need several hours for complete analysis. If this has been doctored, we will find the seams. Garrett gestured toward a bedroom. Rest. We will wake you when we have answers. Sleep came in fragments. Dreams of Elena, training together, flying together, the empty coffin at Arlington. Reaper woke to knocking. Captain, we have results. The specialist gestured to a monitor. The files are authentic. No evidence of manipulation. Video was recorded inside the Pentagon. Audio matches voice patterns of 3 individuals we have on file. This is real. Reaper felt the floor tilt. You are certain? As certain as forensics allows. Occam's razor suggests this is genuine. Garrett's face had gone pale. The specialist pulled up 3 files. Photos appeared, senior defense officials, people with real power. These are the people discussing whether to let American personnel die? Reaper's voice was ice. According to the recording, yes. The specialist pulled up more files, a list of names, 23 operators, 8 Reaper recognized, all dead. Operation Ouroboros targets, the specialist explained. High value but too independent. Each placed in scenarios designed to result in death. Some died as planned, others survived but left service traumatized. Reaper scanned the list, and there near the bottom, one name that made her hands shake. Captain Jessica Kaine, status active target. I am on the list, Reaper whispered. They want you to buck 'em as a hero, the specialist said. It justifies budgets, recruitment, public support. You are worth more to them dead than alive. Garrett paced to the window. This is bigger than any of us. If Ouroboros is real, we are talking about institutional policy, protected at the highest levels. Then we expose it, Reaper said. And who controls those channels? Garrett turned. Media needs Pentagon access. Congress needs defense donations. You go public, you will be discredited. Crazy veteran, Russian asset, whatever narrative protects the program. So we do nothing? We build a case, slowly. Find allies who are clean. Gather more evidence. But we do not rush. Rushing gets us killed. The specialist packed her equipment. Your sister was telling the truth. Ouroboros is real. You are targeted. The hijacking was a test. How long do I have? The specialist shrugged. Impossible to predict. Could be weeks or months. But your sister is classified as neutralized. They think she is dead. That makes her dangerous in ways they have not anticipated. Reaper thought about her sister's final words. When they burn you, remember this conversation. Elena had been trying to warn her, had orchestrated an elaborate operation just to get Reaper's attention, to make her see the truth before it was too late. The hijacking had not been about terrorism or theft or even espionage. It had been about a sister trying to save her twin from a fate Elena had already experienced. I need to contact her, Reaper said. Tell her I believe her, that I understand now. That would be unwise. Garrett's voice was firm. Any communication with your sister puts you at risk. If Ouroboros is monitoring you, and they almost certainly are, they will interpret contact with a known Russian asset as evidence of compromise. It gives them justification to neutralize you immediately rather than waiting for a convenient operation. So I do nothing. I just wait to die. You do your job, Garrett said. You continue being the operator you have always been, but you watch your back. You question orders that do not make sense. You trust your instincts. And you stay alive long enough for us to build the case that brings this whole rotten structure down. The safe house fell into silence. Outside, Berlin continued its night, a city that had seen walls rise and fall, that had survived division and reunification, that understood better than most that systems built on lies eventually collapsed under their own weight. The question was whether Reaper would survive long enough to see that collapse. She thought about the 43 operators she had rescued, thought about Marcus Webb and his twin daughters, thought about all the families who believed their loved ones had died serving something noble, something worth the sacrifice. If Project Ouroboros was real, if those deaths had been manufactured for political gain, then those families deserved the truth. The dead deserved justice, and the living deserved a system that did not see them as expendable resources to be used and discarded. I want to go home, Reaper said finally. Back to the States. Back to my unit. If I am a target, I want to be where I can see threats coming, and I want to be ready when they make their move. Garrett nodded. I will arrange transport. You leave Berlin tomorrow. Different route, different identity. We keep you off-grid until you are back on American soil. After that, you go back to normal operations. But Captain, you need to understand something. From this moment forward, you are living on borrowed time. Every mission could be the one they use to kill you. Every order could be the trap. You cannot trust the chain of command. You cannot trust your fellow operators because you do not know who else is compromised. The only person you can absolutely trust is yourself. And you? Reaper looked at him directly. Can I trust you? Garrett met her gaze without blinking. I have spent 30 years in military intelligence. I have seen things that would make you sick. Operations that violated every principle we claim to stand for. But I still believe, Captain. I still believe that the institution can be saved, that the system can be reformed, that there are enough good people in the machinery to force change. So yes, you can trust me, not because I am perfect or pure, but because I am tired of watching good people die for bad reasons. It was not the reassurance Reaper wanted, but it was honest. And in a world where lies seemed to outnumber truths, honesty was valuable even when it was uncomfortable. She returned to the bedroom, lay down again, but sleep did not come. Her mind kept replaying the conversation with Elena, kept analyzing the files, kept running through scenarios where she could expose Ouroboros and survive the exposure. None of the scenarios ended well, but some of them ended with the truth revealed and the guilty punished. That would have to be enough. Somewhere in the Berlin night, Elena Kaine sat in a different safe house, probably thinking similar thoughts. Two sisters, separated by choices and circumstances, both trying to navigate a world where the people they trusted had betrayed them and the institutions they served had become instruments of their own destruction. They were mirrors of each other. One had chosen to burn the system from outside. The other was trying to reform it from within. Neither approach guaranteed success. Both guaranteed danger. But that was the nature of being a combat rescue officer. You went into situations everyone else considered impossible. You brought people back from the edge, and sometimes the person who needed rescue most was yourself. The Montana wilderness stretched endless in every direction, mountains rising like broken promises against a sky the color of old steel. Captain Jessica Kaine stood at the edge of a forest clearing, breath misting in the cold November air, watching the dirt road that wound through pine trees toward what satellite imagery had identified as an abandoned Cold War missile silo. 48 hours ago, she had been in Berlin learning that her sister was alive and her government wanted her dead. Now she was in the middle of nowhere, following a lead that felt like walking into a trap, but might be the only chance at truth she would ever get. The message had come through encrypted channels, channels routed through so many proxies that tracing the origin would take months. 3 words. Come alone, Montana. The coordinates had followed, pointing to this exact location, and then a name that made Reaper's blood run cold. Frank Bridger, the retired sergeant major from the hijacked C-130, the old ranger who had recognized what she was even when she was hiding in plain sight. He was the one calling her to this isolated corner of America where cell service did not exist and help was hours away, even if you could call for it. The question was whether Frank Bridger was an ally trying to help or another piece in Project Ouroboros' machinery, luring her to a place where her death could be staged as an accident or training mishap. Mountains were good for that. Helicopter crashes, falls during reconnaissance, exposure in bad weather. Any of those scenarios would look tragic but plausible, would create the hero's death that Reaper was apparently worth more for than her continued breathing. Movement at the tree line. Reaper's hand moved to the Glock 19 holstered under her jacket, automatic response. Then she recognized the figure emerging from shadows. Frank Bridger, looking exactly as he had on the aircraft, weathered face and gray hair, and the bearing of a man who had fought in Southeast Asian jungles half a century ago. He walked with a slight limp of old injuries never quite healed, but his eyes were sharp and scanning the terrain with professional awareness. "Captain Kaine," his voice carried across the clearing. "Thank you for coming. I know this looks suspicious as hell. Retired soldier calls you to the middle of nowhere after you just learned your government wants you dead. Not exactly trust-inspiring." Reaper kept her hand near her weapon. "Give me one reason I should not turn around and walk away." "Because I have someone you need to meet." Frank gestured toward the forest behind him. "Someone who has been working against Project Ouroboros longer than you have known it existed. Someone who has proof that even your Colonel Garrett does not have access to. And someone who is risking everything by being here." A second figure emerged from the trees. Smaller than Frank, moving with a kind of careful precision that suggested old wounds and pain managed through will rather than medicine. When the figure stepped into clearer light, Reaper felt her world tilt again, reality rearranging itself into configurations that made no sense. It was Marcus Webb, the F-16 pilot she had rescued from Afghanistan 3 years ago. The man who should be dead according to the Ouroboros target list. The father of twin daughters who had thanked her with tears in his eyes for giving him the chance to hold his children. Except this was not Marcus Webb. The resemblance was there, the same basic features, but this man was older, harder, with scar tissue that spoke of injuries far worse than anything Webb had suffered in that Taliban ambush. "You look confused," the man said. His voice was Webb's voice, aged by pain and betrayal. "That is because Marcus Webb died 6 months after you rescued him. Training accident. F-16 lost power on takeoff, crashed into the ground at 400 knots. Closed casket funeral. Flag to the widow. Standard procedure when Project Ouroboros decides you have outlived your usefulness." Reaper's hand stayed on her weapon. "Who are you?" "Major Ryan Mitchell. Marcus Webb was my younger brother. Different fathers, same mother, grew up in different states. Nobody in the military knew we were related because we had different last names and never served together. Which made it perfect when I started investigating his death and realized it was not an accident." He moved closer, limping badly now, and Reaper saw the extent of his injuries. Burns covered the left side of his face, the kind that came from aviation fuel fires. His left hand was missing 2 fingers. "I was Air Force Special Tactics, combat controller, embedded with SEAL teams, Delta, Rangers, anyone who needed air support coordination. I was good at my job, too good. Started noticing patterns, operations that went wrong in ways that did not make tactical sense. Good people dying in scenarios that felt designed to produce maximum casualties. When my brother died, I started digging, found Project Ouroboros, found the target list, found my name on it." Frank Bridger spoke up. "Major Mitchell came to me 2 years ago. We served together in Panama, different units, but same operational area. I knew him as solid, trustworthy, not prone to conspiracy theories. When he showed me what he had found, I started my own investigation. Quietly, carefully, using contacts from 3 decades in the Army. What I learned made me sick." Ryan pulled out a tablet, older model, heavily encrypted. "Project Ouroboros is bigger than you think. It is not just about sacrificing operators for political gain. That is part of it, yes. But the real purpose is economic. Defense contractors profit from conflict. They profit more from dramatic failures that require new equipment, new training, new systems to prevent the tragedy from happening again. Every operator killed in an Ouroboros scenario generates millions in defense spending. New helicopters because the old ones are not safe enough. New training programs because the current ones failed to prepare personnel. New weapon systems because the ones we have were not sufficient. He pulled up files that made Reaper's stomach turn. Financial records showing money flowing from defense contractors to Pentagon officials. Emails discussing optimal casualty rates for budget justification. Spreadsheets treating human lives as line items in profit calculations. They are farming us, growing soldiers, training them to peak capability, and then harvesting them at exactly the right moment to maximize return on investment. We are not warriors serving our country. We are products in a supply chain that ends with our deaths and someone else's profit. Reaper forced herself to look at the evidence, even though every instinct screamed to look away, to reject information that destroyed everything she thought she understood about service and sacrifice. How long has this been running? Best estimate? 12 years. Frank's voice was heavy. Started small, a few operations here and there where objectives changed at the last minute. Personnel inserted without proper support. Missions designed to fail in ways that look like bad luck or enemy capability. Over time, it got more sophisticated, more organized. Someone high up in the Pentagon realized they could weaponize failure, turn our best warriors into martyrs that serve strategic purposes while alive and economic purposes when dead. Ryan swiped through more files. Your sister, Elena, she stumbled onto this in Syria. Operation Blackbird was not about extracting a Russian defector. Valentina Volkov was already turned, already working for us. The extraction was theater, designed to create a scenario where F-22 pilots would be vulnerable. Your sister was the primary target, too independent, too willing to question orders, too likely to notice the patterns if she survived long enough. They set her up to die saving her wingman. Except she did not die. She ejected, got captured, and the Russians showed her exactly why she had been abandoned. Why are you telling me this? Reaper asked. Why bring me here? Because we need you. Frank's voice carried the weight of command, the tone of a senior NCO who had led men through hell and knew how to ask them to do it again. Colonel Garrett is a good man. He wants to build a case through proper channels. But those channels are controlled by the people running Ouroboros. Every step he takes, they know about it. Every ally he recruits, they assess for compromise potential. He is fighting a war where the enemy controls the battlefield, the supply lines, and the rules of engagement. He cannot win that way. So what is your plan? Reaper asked. Burn it all down, go public with evidence, and hope someone listens? Ryan shook his head. Going public gets us killed. The media will not touch it without verification from official sources, and those sources are compromised. Congress will not investigate without media pressure, and the media will not apply pressure without congressional interest. It is a closed loop designed to protect itself. Then what? Frustration bled into Reaper's voice. We have proof. We know the truth, but we cannot expose it and we cannot stop it. So we do nothing? We create leverage. Ryan pulled up a new file, a schematic of the missile silo behind them. This facility was decommissioned in '95, officially abandoned, stripped of anything valuable. But Frank and we have been using it for 2 years. Secure location, off-grid, perfect place to store evidence that would get us killed if anyone knew we had it. He gestured toward the silo entrance, a concrete structure half buried in the hillside, looking like every abandoned military installation that dotted the American West. Down there, we have servers with encrypted copies of everything: financial records, emails, videos, testimony from 6 other operators who survived Ouroboros scenarios and are willing to talk. We have enough evidence to bring down 3 dozen people, from Pentagon officials to defense contractor executives to politicians who took money to look the other way. But that evidence only matters if we have a way to release it that cannot be stopped. Frank picked up the explanation. Dead man switch, multiple redundant systems. If anything happens to us, if we are killed or disappeared or declared compromised, the evidence goes public simultaneously through channels that cannot be shut down fast enough. WikiLeaks, every major news outlet, congressional oversight committees, foreign intelligence services that would love to embarrass the United States. It all releases at once. Global, irreversible. Reaper understood the strategy: mutually assured destruction, the same principle that had prevented nuclear war during the Cold War. You are holding the Pentagon hostage. We are holding criminals hostage, Ryan corrected. The Pentagon as an institution is not the enemy. Most of the people serving are good, honorable, trying to do the right thing. But there is a cancer in the system, a group that has turned military service into a profit center. We are trying to cut out that cancer without killing the patient. And you want me to be part of this? Reaper asked. To join your operation? We want you to survive. Frank's voice was gentle. Captain, you are on the active target list. They are planning a scenario for you, probably within the next 30 days based on operational tempo and budget cycles. Some mission that requires a combat rescue officer. High risk, low probability of success. Perfect setup for a heroic sacrifice. You go on that mission, you die. That is not speculation, that is certainty. Ryan added, but if you join us, if you become part of the Dead Man Switch network, then killing you becomes too dangerous. Your death triggers the release. Everything goes public. They lose control, so they have to keep you alive, at least until they can figure out how to neutralize the threat. That buys time, time to gather more evidence, time to find allies who cannot be compromised, time to build a case that even the corrupted system cannot ignore. It was a good plan, logical, strategic, the kind of approach that might actually work where direct confrontation would fail. But it required trust. Trust that Frank Bridger and Ryan Mitchell were who they claimed to be. Trust that the evidence in the silo was real and not an elaborate trap. Trust that joining their network would not just make her a bigger target with more sophisticated enemies. I need to see the evidence, Reaper said. Everything you have. I need to verify it as real before I commit to anything. Frank nodded. Fair enough, come on. The silo is about a quarter-mile down that trail. I will warn you, it is not pretty down there. Cold War-era construction, barely habitable, but it is secure. Nobody knows about it except the three of us. Well, four now. They walked through the forest, boots crunching on frost-covered ground, breath misting in air that tasted like winter approaching. The trail wound between pines that had seen decades pass, that had stood here when this silo was active and armed with missiles pointed at Soviet cities, that would probably stand here long after everyone involved in this conspiracy was dead. There was something comforting about that perspective. The long view, the understanding that institutions rose and fell, but the land remained. The silo entrance was disguised as a maintenance shed, weathered wood and rusted metal that looked like it had been abandoned for decades. Frank pulled out a key that unlocked a padlock that itself looked ancient. But when the door swung open, it revealed a newer lock underneath. Biometric scanner, keypad, security that belonged in a classified facility, not a forgotten relic in the Montana woods. Ryan entered a code, pressed his thumb to the scanner. The inner door opened with a hydraulic hiss that suggested regular maintenance and operational systems. Welcome to the last outpost of people who still give a damn about the oath we took. The interior of the silo descended 4 levels underground, concrete and steel construction, built to survive nuclear attack. The first level had been converted into living quarters. Basic, Spartan, but functional. Bunks, a small kitchen, storage lockers. Evidence that people spent time here, that this was more than just a cache site. The second level was where the real work happened. Servers humming with power from generators that ran on propane. Multiple computer workstations. Walls covered with printouts, photographs, diagrams showing connections between people and organizations and money flows. It looked like something from a conspiracy thriller. Except this was real. This was evidence of an actual conspiracy, documented and verified, and waiting for the right moment to detonate in the public consciousness. Ryan sat down at a terminal, began pulling up files. Start with the financial records. Follow the money. That is always the most convincing evidence. Reaper spent 3 hours reviewing documents. Bank transfers from defense contractors to shell companies controlled by Pentagon officials. Emails discussing bonus structures tied to casualty rates. Meeting notes where executives calculated the optimal number of deaths per fiscal year to maximize budget increases without triggering investigations. It was systematic, professional, evil in its banality. The operational files were worse. Detailed plans for scenarios designed to kill specific personnel. Mission briefings that looked normal on the surface but contained subtle changes that would lead to catastrophe. Intelligence reports that had been deliberately falsified to create false targets or overestimate friendly capability. And after action reports that classified obvious murders as unfortunate accidents. Marcus Webb's death was there. His F-16 had not lost power. The fuel had been contaminated with a chemical that caused engine failure at exactly the worst possible moment. The contamination had been deliberate, introduced during routine maintenance by a contractor who had been paid $50,000 for what the paperwork called unspecified technical consulting. Sarah Chen's friendly fire death was there too. The coordinates for air support had been entered wrong. Not by accident, by a fire control specialist who had been promised a promotion and early retirement if he ensured the mission ended with American casualties. The missiles had hit exactly where they were aimed. It was just that they were aimed at the wrong people. How many? Reaper's voice was barely a whisper. How many operators have they killed? Confirmed? 47. Ryan's face was stone. Suspected but not proven? Another 38, over 12 years. That is an average of 7 per year. Not enough to trigger statistical alarms, just enough to maintain the flow of funding and keep the right people wealthy. Frank stood near the wall of photographs, faces of the dead staring out from printouts. Every one of them has a story, a family, people who loved them, dreams that died when they did, and every one of them was told they were serving something greater, protecting freedom, defending the homeland, noble lies that made their murders palatable. Reaper stared at the faces, some she recognized, most she did not. But they were all warriors, all people who had sworn the same oath she had, who had endured the same training, who had believed in the same ideals, and they had been slaughtered by the very institution they had pledged to defend. I am in, Reaper said. Whatever you need, whatever it takes, I am in. Ryan and Frank exchanged glances. Something passed between them. Relief, maybe, or concern. You understand what you are agreeing to? Ryan asked. This is not a military operation with clear objectives and exit strategies. This is a shadow war against an enemy that controls most of the resources and makes the rules. We could be doing this for years, and we could still lose. I understand, Reaper said, but I also understand that doing nothing guarantees they win. At least this way we have a chance. Then we need to get you integrated into the Dead Man's Switch system. Frank moved to one of the workstations. Biometric registration, secure communications setup, protocols for check-ins and threat assessment. If you miss 2 consecutive check-ins without proper authentication, the system assumes you are compromised or dead and initiates the release sequence. 72 hours later, everything goes public unless both Ryan and I countermand the order. The setup took another 2 hours. Fingerprints scanned, retinal patterns recorded, voice samples for authentication, encryption keys generated and backed up to multiple secure locations. By the time they finished, Reaper was integrated into a network that spanned 3 continents and included 12 other operators, all targeted by Ouroboros, all fighting back from the shadows. One more thing, Ryan said. He pulled up a file that made Reaper's breath catch. Elena's face, her sister, alive, dangerous, operating somewhere in the space between American intelligence and Russian interests. Your sister is not part of our network, but she is fighting the same enemy. Different methods, different allegiances, but same goal. She wants Ouroboros destroyed just as much as we do. Have you been in contact with her? Reaper asked. Indirectly, through intermediaries. She knows about the Dead Man's Switch, knows that we are building the case that she started. There is an understanding. We do not interfere with her operations. She does not interfere with ours. And if the time comes when we need to coordinate, channels exist for that communication. Frank pulled up a map showing locations around the world. Safe houses, contact points, dead drops. If you need to reach your sister, if circumstances require it, these are the protocols. But Captain, you need to understand something. Elena is not the person you remember. 3 years of torture, manipulation, and betrayal changed her. She might look like your sister, might sound like her, but the woman she was died in that Syrian prison. What came out is something else, something harder, colder, willing to do things that would make your sister sick. I know, Reaper said. I saw it in Berlin, the way she talked, the way she looked at me, like I was a problem to be solved rather than family to be protected. Do not take it personally, Ryan advised. We all change when we learn the truth. Some of us build walls, Some of us burn bridges. Some of us turn into weapons aimed at the people who hurt us. Your sister chose the last option. She is a weapon now, pointed at Ouroboros and everyone connected to it. That makes her useful, but it also makes her dangerous. The three of them sat in the underground facility, surrounded by evidence of crimes that would shock the nation if anyone saw it, plotting strategy for a war that most people did not know was being fought. Outside, the Montana night had fallen, temperatures dropping below freezing, stars emerging in skies unpolluted by city lights. Beautiful, peaceful, utterly at odds with the ugliness they were documenting. "What happens now?" Reaper asked. "I am part of your network. I am protected by the dead man switch. But that does not stop Ouroboros. It just prevents them from killing me without consequences." "Now we wait," Frank said. "Wait for them to make a move. Wait for them to reveal more of their network. Every operation they run, every target they select, it gives us more data, more connections, more evidence. Eventually they will make a mistake, get sloppy, choose a target that has too much visibility or connections that cannot be quietly erased. When that happens, when they overreach, we strike, release everything, burn the whole corrupt structure to the ground." "And in the meantime," Reaper pressed, "I just go back to my unit, pretend everything is normal, wait for them to test me with missions designed to determine my loyalty?" "Exactly that." Ryan's voice was firm. "You are an operator. You follow orders. You execute missions. You maintain your cover as someone who does not know the truth. Because the moment they realize you are part of this network, the moment they understand you are compromised, they will find other ways to neutralize you. Character assassination, false accusations, anything to destroy your credibility before we can use you as a witness." It was sound tactical advice. Frustrating, maddening even, but sound. Reaper would have to go back to the world where her own chain of command wanted her dead and pretend she did not know. Smile at people who were planning her murder. Follow orders from officials who saw her as livestock to be slaughtered at the optimal market price. The thought made her sick. But she had spent years in environments that made her sick, had carried wounded through landscapes that were actively trying to kill her, had made life and death decisions while exhausted, injured, operating on instinct, and training when conscious thought was impossible. This was just another impossible mission. The only difference was that this one never ended. There was no extraction point, no relief force coming, just day after day of pretending not to know while building the case that would eventually bring justice. "I can do this," Reaper said. "Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I can do this." Frank stood, offered his hand. "I know you can, Captain. That is why we brought you in. Not just because you are on the target list, but because you are the kind of warrior who does not quit, who does not break, who sees impossible situations and finds a way through. We need that. The others in the network need that. Your sister needs that, even if she would never admit it." Reaper shook his hand, felt the strength in the old warrior's grip, then shook Ryan's hand, saw the determination in his eyes that came from watching a brother die and refusing to let that death be meaningless. They were allies now, brothers and sister in arms against an enemy that wore the uniform and spoke the language and pretended to serve the same cause while undermining everything that service was supposed to mean. "One last thing before you go," Ryan said. He pulled out a small device, looked like a key fob. "Emergency beacon, encrypted, satellite uplink. If you are in immediate danger, if you realize a mission is designed to kill you, you activate this. We will know. We will come for you if we can. No guarantees, no promises of rescue. But you will not be alone. Someone will know what happened. Someone will make sure your death is not classified as an accident." Reaper took the divvy, felt its weight in her palm. It was surprisingly heavy for something so small. Or maybe that was just the weight of knowing that activating it might be the last thing she ever did. "Thank you for everything, for showing me the truth, for giving me a chance to fight back." "Thank you for being willing to fight," Frank replied. "Most people, when they learn what we have learned, they run, go off grid, disappear into civilian life and try to forget. Can't blame them. It is the rational choice. But it is not the right choice. The right choice is to stand and fight even when the odds are impossible. That is what warriors do. That is what you do." They walked her back to the surface. Back to the cold Montana night and the stars that had witnessed empires rise and fall and would witness this struggle too, indifferent to the outcome. Reaper's vehicle was where she had left it, unmarked rental that would be returned to an airport in Billings and forgotten. Frank and Ryan would stay at the silo, continue their work, wait for the next piece of evidence or the next operator who needed rescue from a different kind of enemy. "Stay alive, Captain," Ryan said. "Check in every 72 hours. Miss a check-in and we assume the worst." "I will," Reaper promised. "And when this is over, when we have burned Ouroboros to ashes, I want to help rebuild. Make sure the next generation of warriors does not face what we faced." "If we survive that long," Frank said, "get some rest. Tomorrow you go back to being Captain Jessica Kaine, combat rescue officer, loyal soldier. Today you became something else. A warrior fighting a war most people do not even know exists. Welcome to the real battle, Captain. The one that determines whether our service means anything or if we are just pawns in someone else's game." Reaper drove away from the missile silo, watching it disappear in her rearview mirror, knowing she might never see it again. Might never see Frank or Ryan again if things went badly. But she also knew she was not alone anymore. Somewhere in the darkness, her sister was fighting the same enemy. Somewhere in the underground, a network of targeted operators was building the case that would bring justice. Somewhere in the machinery of the Pentagon, good people were trying to root out corruption, even if they did not fully understand the scope of it. The war was not over. It had barely begun. But for the first time since learning the truth, Reaper felt something that resembled hope. Fragile, tentative, wow, but real. The kind of hope that came from knowing you were not fighting alone, that your death, if it came, would not be in vain, that the truth once known could not be completely suppressed forever. She drove through this night, heading back to civilization, back to her cover identity, back to the world where she would pretend not to know the truth while gathering evidence that would eventually destroy the lies. It was not the life she had imagined when she joined the Air Force, not the service she had dreamed of as a child watching fighter jets trace contrails across Texas skies. But it was the life she had now, and she would live it with the same commitment she had brought to every impossible mission. The only easy day was yesterday. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, new opportunities to gather evidence or make mistakes that would get her killed. But that was the nature of being a combat rescue officer. You went into situations everyone else avoided. You brought people back from the edge. And sometimes the person who needed rescue most was the entire institution you had sworn to serve. Reaper drove into this darkness, leaving the Montana wilderness behind, carrying with her the weight of truth and the burden of secrets and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, warriors who refused to quit could change a system that seemed designed to break them. The flight back to Hurlburt Field took 14 hours. Commercial airline, civilian clothes, a Tom Clancy novel as cover. The passengers around her were living normal lives. A businessman, a mother with a toddler, a sleeping college student. None of them knew the woman in 14C carried evidence that could bring down Pentagon officials. Hurlburt Field looked unchanged. Palm trees, humidity, aircraft operations, special operations command territory. Supposed to be the elite, instead a farm where human weapons were grown and harvested when profit margins demanded it. Captain Terry Morrison met her at operations, combat rescue officer. They had trained together. "Welcome back, Reaper. CO wants to see you. Mission brief, high priority. Ice water in her veins." "When?" 30 minutes. Conference room B. Bring your go bag. Wheels up within 6 hours. This was it, the test Ryan had warned about. Conference room B was secured. Armed guard checking IDs. Unusual for routine briefings. Lieutenant Colonel David Santos. Combat veteran. Good reputation. But reputations meant nothing now. "Captain Kaine, we have a situation. Time sensitive. High risk." Two pararescue jumpers introduced themselves. Hawk and Nomad. One combat controller. Captain Jennifer Park. All elite. All potentially on the target list. Santos pulled up satellite imagery. Mountains. Middle East. CIA asset went dark in Paktika province. Dr. Sarah Winters. Missed 3 check-ins. Taliban moved in. 12-hour window before she crosses into Pakistan. The image zoomed in. Cluster of buildings. Mud brick construction. Probably population 300. Remote, difficult terrain. The kind of place where Americans were not welcome and strangers disappeared without trace. Intel suggests she was compromised. Either her cover was blown or someone in the village informed. Taliban elements moved in. As of 6 hours ago, signals intelligence picked up communications suggesting they are moving her to a different location, probably Pakistan. Once she crosses that border, she is gone. Pakistan will not acknowledge her presence, and we cannot mount operations on their soil without creating an international incident. Santos looked at each of them in turn. We have a 12-hour window, maybe less. CIA wants her back. State Department wants to avoid a hostage situation that plays out on television. DOD wants to demonstrate that we protect our people. You four are the rescue package. Fast insertion. Locate the asset. Extract. Combat support will be minimal because we cannot afford the footprint. This is a scalpel operation, not a hammer. Everything about the briefing was textbook. Proper procedure, clear mission parameters, defined objectives. Exactly the kind of operation Reaper had executed dozens of times. Except now she knew that textbook operations could be covers for engineered failures. That clear objectives could be deliberately designed to put personnel in impossible situations. That proper procedure was whatever served the people running Ouroboros. What is our intelligence on hostile forces, Reaper asked. Numbers, weapons, tactical capability. Limited. Santos pulled up threat assessments. Best estimate is 30 to 50 Taliban fighters in the immediate area. Small arms, RPGs, possible technical vehicles with mounted weapons. They know the terrain, they have local support, but they are not expecting a rescue operation. We hit fast before they can organize a defense. Hawk spoke up. Insertion method? Halo jump from a C-130, 20,000 feet. Oxygen required. You will land 3 kilometers from the village. Move in on foot under darkness. Locate the asset. Extract to a cleared landing zone 2 clicks south where an MH-60 will pick you up. Wheels up in 6 hours. Mission duration approximately 18 hours from insertion to extraction. Everything was designed for speed. Minimal planning time, immediate execution, maximum pressure. The kind of operation where mistakes happened because there was no time to identify and correct them before commitment. Classic Ouroboros methodology according to the files Ryan had shown her. Questions? Santos asked. Jennifer Park raised her hand. Rules of engagement? Avoid civilian casualties. Otherwise, you are cleared to engage any hostile forces that threaten the mission or the asset. This is enemy territory. You have the right to defend yourselves. Reaper studied the satellite imagery, looking for details that did not fit. Terrain features that suggested ambush positions, village layouts that would complicate extraction, approaches that channeled movement into kill zones. She saw several, but that could be legitimate tactical challenges rather than deliberately designed traps. The problem with paranoia was that it made everything look suspicious. The problem with Ouroboros was that paranoia was justified. I am in, Nomad said, young, eager. Probably saw this as a chance to prove himself. Had no idea he might be walking into a scenario designed to produce his death. Same, Hawk added. Jennifer looked at Reaper. They had worked together before. Good operator, professional. She was waiting to see how Reaper would respond before committing. This was the moment. Reaper could refuse. Claim illness, equipment malfunction, anything to avoid the mission. But refusing would reveal that she suspected something, would mark her as compromised, would accelerate whatever plans Ouroboros had for her neutralization, and it would abandon Dr. Sarah Winters, who might be a real CIA asset in genuine danger or might be another layer in the deception. I am in, Reaper said. Let's bring her home. Santos nodded, satisfied. Good, you have 6 hours to prep gear, review intel, and brief your team. This is priority 1. Success means we demonstrate our capability and commitment. Failure means a CIA officer potentially dies, and our adversaries get to parade her on propaganda videos. Do not fail. The briefing ended. The 4 operators filed out, heading to equipment storage to draw weapons and specialized gear. Reaper walked with them, maintaining the facade of focused professional preparing for a difficult mission. Inside, her mind raced through scenarios. Scenario 1, Sherm. This was a legitimate rescue operation. Dr. Winters was real, the threat was real, and Reaper's paranoia was just paranoia, in which case she needed to execute flawlessly and bring everyone home. Scenario 2. This was an Ouroboros trap. The operation was designed to fail, either through bad intelligence, inadequate support, or deliberate sabotage. In which case, some or all of them were not coming back. Scenario 3. This was a test, not designed to kill but to assess. See how she responded to pressure, whether she followed orders without question, whether she showed any indication of suspicion or awareness that something was wrong. In which case, her performance would determine the timeline for more lethal scenarios. No way to know which scenario was real. No time to verify, just 6 hours to prepare for a mission that could be routine or could be murder disguised as heroism. In the equipment room, Reaper drew her standard loadout: M4 carbine with advanced optics and infrared laser, Glock 19 sidearm, combat medical kit with trauma supplies and medications, communications gear encrypted to current standards, night vision goggles, oxygen equipment for the halo jump, rations, water, survival gear. Everything she would need to operate in hostile territory for extended periods. She also palmed the emergency beacon, slipped it into a pocket sewn into her combat vest where it would not be obvious during an equipment checks. If this mission was the trap, if she realized they were being led to slaughter, she would activate it. Let Frank and Ryan know. Let the network document her death. Make sure it was not classified as an accident. Hawk and Nomad prepared their gear with the easy confidence of men who had done this before and expected to do it again. Jennifer worked quietly, efficiently, the way controllers always did, focused on the mission rather than the glory. Reaper watched them and wondered which of them would survive if this went bad. Wondered if any of them would. "You seem tense," Jennifer observed, "more than usual." Reaper forced a smile. "Just thinking about the terrain. Those mountains are bad news. Good for ambushes. Hard to get air support in valleys. We need to be fast and smart." "We are always fast and smart," Hawk said with the confidence of youth. "That is why they pick us for this stuff." "That and because we are crazy enough to volunteer," Nomad added. Laughter. Camaraderie. The bond between warriors facing danger together. It was real, authentic, and it made what might be coming even worse. Because if this was an Ouroboros operation, these good people would die believing they were serving their country, would never know that their sacrifice was not for freedom or democracy, but for profit margins and political convenience. 5 hours to wheels up. Reaper used the time to review intelligence files, memorize terrain features, plan contingencies for every scenario she could imagine. But she also used the time to compose a message, encrypted, routed through secure channels to an email address that Frank had provided. Time delayed to send 4 hours after insertion. If she survived, she could cancel it. If she did not, it would become part of the evidence. The message was simple: mission parameters, personnel involved, her suspicions, and a request. If this goes bad, make sure people know the truth. Make sure our deaths are not classified as accidents. Make sure someone pays for this. She hit send on the delayed transmission, watched it queue in the encrypted system, felt a small measure of relief. Whatever happened in Afghanistan, it would not disappear into classified files and forgotten statistics. The network would know. Elena would know, and eventually the truth would come out. 2 hours before insertion, the team gathered for final briefing. Santos provided updated intelligence. Dr. Winters had been confirmed alive as of 90 minutes ago. Signals intercepts suggested she was being held in a specific building in the village. Guards were present, but not heavily armed. The window for extraction was narrowing as preparations for her movement to Pakistan were underway. "This is it," Santos said. "This is what we train for. High-risk rescue in denied territory. You are the best we have. Bring her home. Bring yourselves home. Make us proud." Noble words, inspiring if you believed them, hollow if you knew what Reaper knew. 1 hour before wheels up, Reaper stood on the tarmac watching the C-130 Hercules being prepped for flight. Same aircraft type as the Hijacking. Different plane, but the association was unavoidable. Last time she had been on one of these, Anton Volkov had taken it over, and her sister had revealed herself to be alive and working for the enemy. Now she was about to board another one and jump into darkness over hostile territory on a mission that might be designed to kill her. The emergency beacon was in her vest pocket. Her weapons were loaded. Her team was ready. The mission clock was counting down. And somewhere in a Pentagon office or defense contractor boardroom, people were possibly watching this unfold, waiting to see if their carefully designed scenario would produce the martyrs they needed for next quarter's budget justification. "Ready, Reaper?" Jennifer asked. Reaper looked at her fellow operator, saw determination, courage, the willingness to walk into danger for someone she had never met. That was the best of what service was supposed to mean, and it was being exploited by the worst kind of corruption. "Ready," Reaper said. "Let's go save a life." They boarded the C-130. The cargo ramp closed, the engine spooled up, and Captain Jessica Kaine, combat rescue officer, callsign Reaper, flew into the night carrying the weight of knowledge that made every decision more complicated and every mission a potential trap. But she flew anyway, because that was what warriors did. They went where others would not. They brought people back from the edge. And sometimes the only way to expose evil was to walk into it with eyes open and hope you survived long enough to testify. The darkness at 20,000 feet over Afghanistan was absolute. No moon, clouds obscuring the stars. Just the sound of wind screaming past the open cargo ramp and the green glow of night vision goggles turning the world into shades of emerald nightmare. Captain Jessica Kaine stood at the edge of the abyss, oxygen mask feeding her lungs, parachute harness tight across her chest, every nerve alive with the awareness that she was about to jump into what might be her own grave. Halo insertion. High altitude, low opening. You fell through thin air for 90 seconds before pulling the ripcord, relying on oxygen bottles and thermal suits to keep you alive, while you dropped through sky cold enough to freeze exposed flesh in minutes. It was dangerous in the best circumstances, suicidal if the operation was compromised. And Reaper still did not know which this was. Hawk gave her a thumbs up. Nomad checked his altimeter. Jennifer Park's eyes were visible through her goggles, steady and focused. They trusted the mission, trusted the intelligence, trusted that the system sending them into harm's way was functioning with their best interests at heart. They had no idea that trust might be the weapon being used to kill them. The jumpmaster held up 5 fingers. 5 minutes to drop zone. Reaper's hand moved unconsciously to the pocket where the emergency beacon waited. One activation would alert Frank and Ryan, would tell them this mission was happening, would ensure that if things went wrong, someone would know it was not an accident. But activating it now would also potentially compromise her position if anyone was monitoring for unusual transmissions. She left it alone, committed to the jump, to the mission, to finding out whether this was rescue or murder. 4 fingers, 3, 2, 1, green light. Hawk went first, diving into darkness with the practiced grace of someone who had done this hundreds of times. Nomad followed. Jennifer Park third. Then Reaper, stepping into space 20,000 feet above hostile territory, falling into night with nothing but faith in equipment and training to keep her alive. The fall was silence and speed and the peculiar sensation of weightlessness that came from terminal velocity. Wind tore at her gear. The altimeter on her wrist counted down with digital precision. 18,000 feet. 15. 12. The oxygen bottle hissed with each breath. Her body remembered the drill. Stay stable. Track toward the designated landing zone. Do not think about the ground rushing up or the fact that one equipment malfunction meant death. At 8,000 feet, the mountains below became visible through night vision. Jagged peaks, deep valleys, terrain that killed pilots who flew too low, and soldiers who tried to fight without understanding the verticality of the battlefield. The kind of place where ambushes were easy and escape routes were limited, and every tactical decision could be your last. 5,000 feet. Reaper pulled her ripcord. The parachute deployed with a jarring deceleration that felt like someone had grabbed her by the shoulders and yanked upward. Straps cut into her legs and chest, but the canopy was good. Steering toggles responded. She could see the other 3 chutes deployed above and around her. All good so far. The landing zone was a clearing 3 kilometers from the target village. Rocky ground, scattered vegetation, cover from observation but exposed to anyone who knew where to look. Reaper steered toward it, managing her descent, watching for threats that might be waiting. Taliban fighters with night vision. Ambush teams positioned to cut them down before they could consolidate. Any of those scenarios would confirm this was an Ouroboros trap. Her boots hit ground harder than ideal. She rolled, absorbed the impact, released the parachute harness, and immediately went prone with her M4 rifle up and scanning. Night vision painted the world in green and black. Movement to her left. Hawk collapsing his chute. Right. Nomad doing the same. Jennifer Park landed 30 meters away, smooth and professional. No gunfire, no explosions, no ambush materializing from the darkness. Either the intelligence was good or the trap was more sophisticated than immediate contact. They consolidated in a dry creek bed that offered concealment and a natural rally point. Gathered their chutes, buried them under rocks with practiced efficiency. Checked equipment, weapons, communications. Everything functional. Everything according to plan. Which meant either the plan was legitimate or the failure point was further ahead. Comms check, Jennifer whispered into her radio, the signal encrypted and frequency hopping to prevent interception. Hawk, Nomad, Reaper, sound off. Reaper. Hawk, good. Nomad, solid. Reaper up. Her voice was steady despite the adrenaline, years of training overriding the fear that this might be the last mission she ever ran. Command, this is Rescue 1, on ground, all personnel accounted for. Beginning movement to objective. Jennifer's voice was calm, professional, the voice of someone who believed this was routine. The response came back through satellite relay, with a slight delay that meant it was being routed through multiple secure channels. Rescue 1, this is command. Confirmed. You are cleared to proceed. Updated intel shows assets still at original location. Window closing in 8 hours. Execute at your discretion. 8 hours. Enough time to move to the village, locate Dr. Winters, plan the extraction. Not enough time for proper reconnaissance or contingency development. Rush jobs led to mistakes. Mistakes led to casualties. That was basic tactical doctrine, which meant either command was accepting higher risk for strategic reasons, or they wanted casualties for reasons that had nothing to do with strategy. The team moved out in tactical formation, Jennifer on point with her combat controller training, reading terrain and selecting routes that balance speed with concealment. Hawk and Nomad flanking, weapons ready, eyes scanning for threats. Reaper at the rear, medical gear accessible, maintaining security on their back trail, while her mind ran through scenarios that all ended badly. 3 kilometers through Afghan mountains at night was normally a 2-hour movement for trained operators. They did it in 90 minutes, pushing the pace, accepting slightly higher exposure risk for the sake of the shrinking mission window. The village appeared as a cluster of dim lights in a valley, mud brick buildings arranged around a central square. Population maybe 300, most of them asleep or pretending to be. They established an observation post on high ground overlooking the target. Jennifer pulled out her tablet, overlaid satellite imagery with their direct observation, identifying the building where Dr. Winters was supposedly being held. 2-story structure, stone construction, guards visible at the entrance. 2 men, AK-47 rifles, looking alert but not particularly disciplined. That is our target, Jennifer whispered. Intel says asset is on the 2nd floor, northwest room. 2 guards outside, unknown number inside. Rules of engagement are clear. We get in, get her, get out. Minimal contact if possible. Hawk studied the approaches through his rifle optic. Main road is too exposed. Back approach through the alley gives us cover to within 20 meters. Breach the rear door, clear to the 2nd floor. Extract through the same route. Simple. Too simple, Reaper thought. In her experience, operations that looked simple on paper became complex in execution. Variables multiplied, Murphy's Law applied force, and in an Ouroboros scenario, the complexity was deliberately designed to create casualties. I do not like it, Nomad said, voicing what Reaper was thinking. This feels too easy. 2 guards, in Taliban territory with a high-value hostage, they should have more security. Maybe they do not think we are coming, Hawk countered. Maybe they think Americans will not risk an insertion this deep. Maybe we have the element of surprise. Jennifer looked at Reaper. What do you think? This was the moment. Reaper could voice her concerns, could argue for more reconnaissance, better intelligence, slower execution. But doing so would mark her as hesitant, possibly compromised. Definitely not the aggressive operator her file said she should be, and it would not stop the mission. It would just create doubt about her fitness for command. I think we execute, Reaper said, but we go in expecting contact, full tactical. Assume every room has a threat until proven otherwise, and we have an abort plan if things go sideways. Agreed. Jennifer checked her watch. We move in 30 minutes. Use the time to prep. This is what we train for. Reaper used those 30 minutes to perform checks that were part procedure and part prayer. Weapons loaded, medical gear accessible, communications working. And quietly, carefully, She activated the emergency beacon in her vest pocket. The tiny device would transmit a burst signal every 60 seconds, too brief and too encrypted to be easily detected by local forces. But Frank and Ryan would see it, would know she was in contact, would track her location and be ready to document what happened. If this was legitimate, the beacon was just insurance. If this was a trap, it was evidence. The team moved down from the observation post using a route that kept them in dead ground, invisible to the village sentries. The back alley approach was exactly as Jennifer had described. Narrow, dark, lined with mud brick walls that channeled movement but also provided cover. They stacked on the rear door of the target building. Old wood, simple lock. Hawk had it open in 15 seconds without making noise that would alert anyone inside. Interior was dark. Smell of cooking oil and unwashed bodies. Ground floor appeared to be living quarters. Sleeping pallets, personal belongings. No occupants visible. Which was wrong. A building being used to hold a prisoner should have people in it. Guards, handlers, someone maintaining security. Unless everyone was upstairs with the prisoner. Or unless this was a trap and the building was empty, except for what waited on the second floor. They moved through the ground floor in tactical clearing pattern. Each room checked. Each corner examined. Nothing. The stairs to the second floor were stone, worn smooth by decades of use. They creaked despite careful foot placement. At the top, a hallway with 3 doors. The northwest room, according to intelligence, was the one on the left. Jennifer stacked the team. Hawk would breach. Nomad would follow. Jennifer would provide security in the hallway. Reaper would be third in, ready to provide medical aid to the asset if needed. Ready. Hawk tested the door handle. Unlocked, which was another wrong detail in a growing list of things that did not fit tactical logic. He looked back at the team. Silent question. Everyone ready? 3 nods. He opened the door fast, weapon up, night vision painting the room in green light. A woman sat in the corner, hands zip-tied behind her back, blindfold over her eyes, mouth gagged. 30s. Athletic build. Wearing outdoor clothes that looked like they had been worn for days. Matching the description of Dr. Sarah Winters. Alive. Apparently unharmed. No guards in the room. Reaper's tactical sense screamed wrong, wrong, wrong. But Hawk was already moving forward. Nomad covering. Jennifer in the hallway maintaining security. Reaper entered third, moved to the woman, began cutting the zip ties with her knife. Dr. Winters? Sarah Winters? We are American military, here to extract you. Stay quiet. Move when we tell you, understand? The woman nodded frantically. Reaper removed the gag. Winters sucked in air, voice hoarse. Thank God. Thank God. They were going to move me tomorrow. Said they would kill me if extraction failed. You are safe now, Reaper said, the words automatic even though she was not sure they were true. Can you walk? Yes, I am okay. Scared, but okay. Too easy. This was too easy. Reaper looked at Hawk, saw the same doubt in his eyes. Nomad kept his weapon trained on the door, expecting the trap to spring. Jennifer's voice came through the radio. Hallway secure, but we need to move. Now, something feels wrong. They moved Dr. Winters into the hallway, began descending the stairs in reverse order. Reaper at the rear now, walking backward, covering their exit. Winters between Nomad and Hawk, Jennifer on point. Standard extraction formation. That was when the building exploded. Not the entire structure, just the ground floor where they had entered. A shaped charge designed to collapse the rear wall and block the exit route. The blast wave threw Reaper forward, tumbling down the stairs in chaos of noise and dust and debris. Her night vision goggles shattered. Electronics died, ears ringing from overpressure, body battered from the fall. She rolled to her feet on instinct, weapon up, regular vision adjusting to darkness, punctuated by flames from the explosion. Hawk was down, bleeding from the head, unconscious but breathing. Nomad was trying to pull him to cover. Jennifer had Winters, protecting her with her own body. And from outside, the sound Reaper had been dreading. Gunfire. Multiple weapons, coordinated fire. Ambush, just like she had suspected, just like Ryan had warned. We are compromised, Jennifer shouted into her radio. Rescue 1 is under fire. Request immediate support. Repeat, immediate support. The response was static. Either the communications were jammed or damaged, or command was not responding because response was never part of the plan. They were on their own. Reaper dragged Hawk into what remained of a room, stone walls providing cover from the incoming fire. Checked his pulse. Strong, pupils reactive. Concussion from the blast, but probably not fatal if they could extract him. Nomad was returning fire through a window, controlled bursts, trying to suppress the attackers long enough to think. How many? Reaper asked. At least 20, probably more. They have the building surrounded, professional positions. This was planned. Of course it was planned, either by Taliban fighters who had been warned about the rescue attempt or by Ouroboros operators who had set up American personnel to be killed by enemy forces. The end result was the same. They were trapped in a burning building with overwhelming hostile forces outside and no apparent extraction plan. Reaper activated her radio, switched to the frequency Frank had provided for emergencies. Guardian, this is Reaper. Mission compromised. Under fire. Request immediate assistance. She did not expect a response. The satellite relay would take time, and even if Frank and Ryan received the message, they were thousands of miles away. Help was not coming from them. But someone needed to know what happened here. Someone needed to document that this was not an accident. Dr. Winters was crying, shaking, the reality of the situation overwhelming whatever training or courage she possessed. Jennifer held her, protecting her, but also probably doing calculations similar to Reaper's. How long could they hold? What were the odds of survival? Was there any way out of this that did not end with bodies and flag-draped coffins? The gunfire intensified. RPG round hit the second floor, exploded in the hallway, brought down part of the ceiling. The building was dying around them, fire spreading, structure compromised, minutes until it became a tomb rather than a defensive position. "We have to move," Nomad shouted over the noise. "Staying here means death." "Moving means death faster," Jennifer countered. "They have every approach covered." Reaper checked her ammunition. 4 magazines left, maybe 200 rounds. Against 20 or more fighters with better positions and home field advantage. The math did not work, not for traditional tactics. But Reaper was not a traditional tactician. She was a combat rescue officer. Someone who specialized in going into impossible situations and bringing people back. And if this was an Ouroboros trap, if this mission had been designed to kill them, then the only way to survive was to do something they had not planned for. "The roof," Reaper said. "We go up. Get above their firing positions. Call for extraction from altitude." "There is no extraction coming." Nomad's voice carried desperation. "Communications are dead." "Then we make our own extraction." Reaper pulled out her tablet, damaged but functional, pulled up the topographic map. "There is a wadi 200 meters north, deep enough for concealment. If we can break contact, get to that wadi, we can move undercover to the emergency landing zone." "And how do we break contact?" Jennifer asked. "We are pinned down by superior forces in a burning building." Reaper smiled without humor. "We give them what they want. A burning building with Americans inside, then we leave." She explained the plan in 30 seconds. It was insane. High risk of casualties. But staying was certain death. And running blind was equally fatal. This gave them a chance. Slim, but real. Jennifer looked at the others. Nomad nodded. Hawk was still unconscious. Would have to be carried. Dr. Winters was terrified, but listening. "We do this," Jennifer decided. "Reaper, you lead. Nomad, you carry Hawk. I have got Winters. We move on your signal." Reaper gathered materials from the burning building. Clothes, bedding, anything that would burn and create smoke. Piled them in the room where they had been sheltering. Poured lamp oil from broken containers. Created a bonfire waiting to happen. Then she pulled a thermite grenade from her kit. Military grade. Burned at 4,000 degrees. Would consume anything it touched and create enough smoke to obscure the entire area. "When this goes off, we have maybe 60 seconds of concealment," Reaper explained. "Move fast, move quiet, get to the wadi. Anyone stops, anyone falls behind, we leave them. Understood?" Hard words, necessary words, the kind of command decision that separated leaders from people who just wore the rank. Everyone nodded, even Dr. Winters, understanding that this was survival now, not rescue. Reaper pulled the pin on the thermite grenade, dropped it into the pile of combustibles, and ran for the stairs leading to the roof. The grenade detonated with a hiss and roar. White-hot flames consumed everything. Smoke billowed. The entire building became a furnace pumping black clouds into the Afghan night. They hit the roof running. Single-story drop from the rear wall into an alley the Taliban fighters had not covered. because they assumed Americans would try to break out at ground level. Reaper went first, landing hard, rolling, coming up with weapon ready. Clear. Nomad came next, carrying Hawk and a fireman's carry that looked impossible until you remembered these were men who trained by carrying each other up mountains. Jennifer and Winters last. The smoke provided concealment for maybe 45 seconds. Reaper led them north using every bit of cover, moving in short rushes between buildings while the Taliban fighters focused on the burning structure they thought contained trapped Americans. Shouts in Pashto, confusion, probably thinking their targets had been killed in the blast or were about to be burned alive. They made it to the wadi, deep cut in the earth where seasonal water had carved a channel over centuries. 10 feet deep, 50 feet wide, running generally northeast away from the village. Perfect concealment if they could get into it without being seen. Reaper slid down the embankment. The others followed. They collapsed in the darkness, breathing hard, checking for injuries. Hawk was regaining consciousness, groaning, trying to focus. Nomad had a cut on his arm, bleeding but not serious. Jennifer was intact. Winters was in shock but mobile. Reaper had taken shrapnel in her leg from the initial explosion. Had not felt it during the escape. Felt it now as adrenaline wore off and pain signals reached her brain. Sound off, Reaper ordered. Anyone critical? Negatives all around. Hurt but functional. The team medic training kicked in. She applied pressure dressing to her own leg, wrapped Nomad's arm, checked Hawk's pupils, and confirmed he was not seriously concussed despite the head wound. Communications? Jennifer tried her radio again. Still static. Either the equipment was damaged, or they were being jammed, or command had decided not to respond. Regardless, they were alone. We moved to the emergency LZ, Reaper said. 2 clicks east. If the extraction bird is coming, that is where it will be. If not, we find another way out. On foot through Taliban territory with an injured operator and a civilian? Nomad's voice carried the skepticism the situation deserved. That is suicide. So is staying here. Reaper pulled out her tablet again, checked their position. We move now while we have darkness. Come sunrise, they will track us. We need distance, and we need it now. They moved through the wadi, using the concealment, making better time than Reaper had hoped. Hawk was walking now, supported by Nomad. Winters was keeping pace, fear giving her energy, 2 kilometers in 40 minutes. Not fast by operational standards, but acceptable given the circumstances. The emergency landing zone was a clearing near the wadi, large enough for a helicopter to land, exposed enough to be dangerous if anyone was watching. They approached carefully, weapons ready, expecting another ambush. Instead, they found a miracle. An MH-60 Blackhawk sat in the clearing, rotors turning, crew chief visible in the door with a machine gun. Not the scheduled extraction bird. This one had different markings. Civilian contractor configuration. And standing next to it, wearing flight gear and a smile that could cut glass, was Elena Kaine, Reaper's sister. Alive here. Impossible. You called for a ride? Elena shouted over the rotor noise. Guardian Network received your beacon. I was in the area, thought you might need extraction. Reaper wanted to ask 1,000 questions. How Elena had gotten a helicopter, how she had found them, how she had known this mission would go bad. But there was no time. The Taliban fighters would realize their targets had escaped, would be coming, and this helicopter was the only way out. Load up, Reaper ordered. Hawk and Nomad went first, dragging themselves aboard. Jennifer helped Winters. Reaper went last, climbing into the cargo bay, looking back at her sister in the pilot's seat. Thank you, Reaper said. Inadequate words for impossible rescue. Thank me when we are out of Afghan airspace. Elena's hands moved over the controls with practiced efficiency. Everyone strapped in? Good. This is going to be fast and possibly illegal in 3 different countries. The Black Hawk lifted off, nose tilting forward, gaining speed and altitude. Behind them, muzzle flashes appeared as Taliban fighters reached the landing zone and opened fire. Rounds pinged off the armored fuselage. But Elena was already too high, too fast, vectoring away from the threat with the kind of aggressive flying that only combat pilots attempted. Where are we going? Jennifer asked. Pakistan initially, Elena replied. I have landing clearance at a civilian airfield just across the border. From there, you connect with official channels. I disappear. We never had this conversation. You tell your debrief that an unidentified helicopter extracted you. Probably drug smugglers who saw an opportunity for a favor from the Americans. Keep my involvement classified. Jennifer looked at Reaper. Questions obvious. How did a civilian pilot happen to be in Afghanistan with a helicopter and the skill to execute a combat extraction? Reaper shook her head. Not now, later, maybe. The flight to Pakistan took 20 minutes of low-level flying through mountain passes, Elena pushing the helicopter to limits that made Reaper's stomach clench. But her sister knew what she was doing, had always been the better pilot, more aggressive, more willing to test the edge. They landed at a strip that looked barely legitimate. Fuel tanks, a few buildings, probably used for smuggling operations when not hosting emergency extractions of American operators. A man waited near a hangar, official-looking, probably Pakistani intelligence, making sure this incident was handled quietly. "This is where I leave you," Elena said as the rotors spooled down. "Your people will be here in 30 minutes. You will be debriefed. Your mission will be classified as a success despite the complications. Dr. Winters will be safely returned, and in the official record, I was never here." Reaper grabbed her sister's arm. "We need to talk. About everything. About Ouroboros. About what you are doing. About what I am doing." "I know what you are doing." Elena's expression was complex. "Frank and Ryan briefed me. You joined the network. You are fighting from inside while I fight from outside. Good. We need both approaches." She paused. The mission tonight was an Ouroboros setup. Intelligence deliberately compromised. Extraction support deliberately delayed. They wanted casualties. Probably you specifically. High-value target, hero death. Perfect for their purposes. "How did you know?" "Because I have access to their communications now. I have been inside their network for 6 months. Listening, watching. Tonight, when I saw the mission parameters, I knew it was designed to fail. So I positioned assets, made sure you had a way out." Elena's voice softened. "You are my sister, Jess. I let you think I was dead for 3 years. I am not letting you actually die." Tears threatened, but Reaper forced them back. Operators did not cry, except she was not just an operator, she was a sister, a twin. Someone who had just been rescued by family when the institution she served had tried to kill her. "What happens now?" Reaper asked. "Now you go back. Report the mission, play your role, gather evidence, work with Frank and Ryan to build the case. And when the time is right, when we have everything we need, we burn Ouroboros to ashes." Elena's smile was cold. "They wanted to sacrifice warriors for profit. We are going to show them what happens when the weapons they built turn against their masters." "Will I see you again?" "Probably not for a while. I operate in shadows. You operate in light. But we are fighting the same war. And eventually we will win because we are warriors. We do not quit. We do not break. And we sure as hell do not forget." Elena returned to the helicopter, climbed back into the pilot's seat. The rotors began spinning up again. She would be gone before the official extraction team arrived, vanishing into the network of contacts and resources she had built over 3 years of operating outside American authority. The Black Hawk lifted off, turned east, disappeared into the dawn light breaking over Pakistan. Reaper watched it go, then turned to her team. Hawk was sitting, holding his head, probably concussed but alive. Nomad was treating his arm. Jennifer had Winters, keeping her calm. All of them had survived what was designed to be their death. "What do we tell them?" Jennifer asked. "Command will want a full debrief. They will want to know how we survived." "We tell them the trick," Reaper said. "Modified. We were ambushed. Building exploded. We fought our way out. Unidentified helicopter, probably smugglers, saw the firefight and decided helping Americans was good for future business. They extracted us. We do not know who they were. We got lucky." "That is the story?" Nomad looked skeptical. "They will investigate." "Let them investigate." Reaper's voice was firm. "They will find nothing because there is nothing to find. And meanwhile, we write our after-action reports. We document every detail of how the intelligence was wrong, how the support was inadequate, how the mission parameters were designed to fail. We build the case, one report at a time, one piece of evidence at a time, until the pattern is too obvious to ignore." An hour later, official American helicopters arrived. Air Force pararescue birds with proper markings and medical personnel and command staff ready to debrief. The team was loaded aboard. Dr. Winters was treated for dehydration and shock, but otherwise unharmed. The operators were evaluated, injuries documented, stories recorded. Lieutenant Colonel Santos was there, his face showing concern that looked genuine. What happened out there? We lost communications. Thought you were dead. Ambush, Reaper said. Intelligence was compromised. Taliban knew we were coming, set explosives, surrounded the building. We fought our way out. She gave him the modified story, close enough to truth to be believable, different enough to protect Elena. Santos listened, nodded, made notes. You are lucky to be alive, all of you. This mission should have been a disaster. Instead, it is a success, asset recovered, team intact, outstanding work under impossible circumstances. Success. They were calling it a success, despite the ambush, despite the casualties they almost suffered, despite everything designed to kill them. Because Dr. Winters was alive, and that was all that mattered for the official record. But Reaper knew the truth. This had been attempted murder, dressed up as heroic rescue, and the only reason they survived was because her sister had been watching, because the resistance network had activated, because warriors who refused to be victims had fought back. Back at Hurlburt Field, 3 days later, Reaper sat in the same conference room where this had started. Colonel Garrett was there, having flown in from Germany. Frank Bridger, officially retired but somehow present with proper credentials. And on a secure video link, Ryan Mitchell, his burned face visible on screen. You activated the beacon, Frank said. We tracked the mission, watched it unfold. We're ready to release the dead man switch files if you did not make it out. My sister saved us, Reaper said. She was there, with a helicopter, extracted us when official support failed. Elena is playing a dangerous game, Garrett observed, operating in denied territory, using resources we cannot track. If she gets caught, we cannot help her. She knows, Reaper replied. She accepts the risk, just like we do. Ryan leaned forward on screen. The mission in Afghanistan confirms the pattern. Ouroboros is active. They are targeting personnel. Your survival creates problems for them. They will try again. Different approach, more sophisticated. You need to be ready. I am ready, Reaper's voice was firm. And next time, we will not just survive. We will document. We will gather evidence. We will build the case that destroys them. Frank pulled out files. After action reports from the Afghanistan mission, discrepancies between the intelligence provided and the reality encountered, communications failures that looked suspicious, timing of the ambush that suggested prior warning. This is the evidence we need. More operations like this, more failures that create patterns too obvious to dismiss. Eventually, someone in oversight will notice. Someone with power will ask questions. And when they do, we will have answers. How long, Reaper asked. How long do we keep doing this? As long as it takes, Garrett said. This is not a sprint. It is a marathon. We are fighting institutional corruption. That does not die quickly, but it does die. History proves it. Watergate, Iran-Contra, Abu Ghraib. Eventually the truth comes out. Eventually people are held accountable. We just have to survive long enough to make it happen. Reaper thought about the 47 operators confirmed killed by Ouroboros. Thought about the families who believed their loved ones died serving something noble. Thought about her sister, operating in shadows, fighting the same enemy from outside the system. Thought about Frank and Ryan and the others in the network, risking everything to expose corruption. Then we survive, Reaper said. We do our jobs, we follow orders, we gather evidence, and when the time is right, we bring justice. For the dead, for the living, for everyone who ever believed that service meant something. She stood, looked at the men who had become her true chain of command, the network of warriors fighting a war most people did not know existed. The only easy day was yesterday. Tomorrow we continue the mission, whatever it takes, however long it takes, until Ouroboros burns and the people running it face consequences. Frank stood, offered his hand. Reaper shook it, the grip of one warrior acknowledging another. Welcome to the real fight, Captain, the one that determines whether our oath means anything or if we are just tools for people who see us as expendable. You have already proven you can survive. Now we find out if you can win. Reaper left the conference room, walked out into Florida sunlight, felt the heat on her face after days of cold mountains and burning buildings. Somewhere her sister was planning the next operation. Somewhere Frank and Ryan were analyzing data. Somewhere the network was growing, adding operators who had survived their own Ouroboros scenarios and wanted revenge. The war was far from over. It was just beginning. But for the first time since learning the truth, Reaper felt something stronger than hope. She felt certainty, the certainty that came from having survived the kill shot, from having allies in the darkness, from knowing that the system designed to break her had failed. They wanted a hero's death. They would get a warrior's resistance. They wanted a sacrifice. They would get a reckoning. And when the truth finally came to light, when Project Ouroboros was exposed and the guilty were brought to justice, Captain Jessica Kaine, combat rescue officer, callsign Reaper, would be there to testify, to name names, to ensure that the warriors who died were honored and the villains who killed them were destroyed. Until that day, she would fly into danger, would rescue the lost, would serve with honor even when the institution she served had none. Because that was what warriors did. They held the line. They protected the innocent. They refused to become the monsters they fought. The only easy day was yesterday. Tomorrow would bring new missions, new dangers, new opportunities to gather the evidence that would eventually end this nightmare. But tonight, Reaper would sleep with the knowledge that she had survived, that her team had survived, that her sister was alive and fighting, that justice, though delayed, was still possible. And tomorrow she would wake up and do it all again, because that was what it meant to be a combat rescue officer. You went into impossible situations. You brought people back from the edge. And sometimes the person who needed rescue most was the entire system you had sworn to serve. The sun set over Hurlburt Field. The day ended. The mission continued. And in the shadows between light and darkness, warriors who refused to quit prepared for the next battle in a war that would define whether service meant sacrifice or survival, whether honor was real or just another word powerful people use to make useful people die. Reaper chose survival, chose honor, chose to fight until the truth won or she died trying. There was no other choice worth making. 6 months later, the network had grown. Reaper stood in the expanded operations center with Frank Bridger, Ryan Mitchell on screen, and 12 other operators, all targeted by Ouroboros, all fighting back. Status report, Frank said. Colonel Garrett pulled up files. 3 more missions fit the Ouroboros pattern. 7 operators dead, Rangers in Syria, SEALs in Yemen, all on the target list. How much longer? Ryan's voice was bitter. How much more evidence? We need a trigger, Frank said, something that cannot be ignored. Marine Colonel Sarah Martinez spoke up. Senator Richard Vance, Armed Services Committee. His son just got orders for a deployment that looks like an Ouroboros setup. The senator is asking questions. Getting stonewalled, he might be receptive. Too risky, Garrett objected. We are already loose ends, Reaper said. We approach Vance, give him enough to ask the right questions. When Ouroboros tries to shut him down, we release everything. That is dangerous, Ryan said. Once we release, we become targets. Let them try, Reaper's voice carried steel. We have evidence. We have witnesses. We have truth. Frank nodded. We vote, show of hands. One by one, hands went up. Unanimous. Then we move, Frank said. We contact Vance. Watch Ouroboros react. When they overreach, we strike. Total exposure. The meeting broke up. Reaper stayed behind. You did good work tonight, Frank said. 6 months ago, you were focused on survival. Now you are thinking strategically. I learned from the best. Frank turned to face her. Your sister reached out, said to tell you she is proud. The words hit hard. How is she? Dangerous. She has compromised Ouroboros communications, feeding us intelligence, conducting operations, making them bleed financially like they made us bleed literally. She is going to get herself killed, probably, but she is taking a lot of them with her. Frank's expression turned serious. Your sister made her choice 3 years ago when they left her to die in Syria. She could have disappeared, gone civilian, built a life somewhere they would never find her. Instead, she chose revenge. That choice has a cost, but it also has power. She is fighting a war that terrifies them because she operates outside all their systems of control. Reaper understood. Elena had become exactly what Ouroboros feared most. A warrior with nothing left to lose and every skill necessary to hurt them. While Reaper fought from inside the system, gathering evidence for legal prosecution, Elena fought from outside, conducting operations that would never appear in any court record but still damage the conspiracy in ways that mattered. 2 sisters, 2 approaches, same enemy. When this is over, Reaper said, when we have exposed Ouroboros and brought them down, what happens to Elena? She has committed crimes, worked with foreign intelligence, conducted unauthorized operations on sovereign soil. That does not just go away because she was fighting the bad guys. That is a problem for later, Frank replied. First we survive, then we win, then we figure out what justice looks like for people who fought dirty wars against dirty enemies. Your sister knows the risks. She accepted them when she chose this path. It was not the answer Reaper wanted, but it was the truth. And truth, however ugly, was better than comfortable lies. She left the missile silo, drove back through Montana wilderness toward civilization, toward her duty station, toward the life she was living as cover for the war she was really fighting. The sun was setting, painting mountains in gold and purple, creating beauty that contrasted sharply with the ugliness she had spent the day discussing. Somewhere in those mountains, buried under snow and secrets, was evidence that would eventually bring down powerful people. Somewhere in the world, her sister was conducting operations that would never be acknowledged. Somewhere in the Pentagon, Ouroboros was planning the next sacrifice, unaware that the weapons they had built were turning against them. The war continued. The mission never ended. But now, finally, there was a path to victory, narrow, dangerous, requiring perfect execution and impossible luck, but real as the evidence accumulated in underground servers and the testimony waiting to be given and the truth demanding to be heard. Captain Jessica Kaine, combat rescue officer, callsign Reaper, drove into the sunset carrying the weight of dead warriors and the hope of justice delayed but not denied. She had survived the attempts to kill her, had built a network of resistance from survivors who refused to be victims, had found her sister alive and fighting the same war from different angles. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions that might be legitimate or might be traps, new opportunities to gather evidence or make mistakes that prove fatal. But tonight, driving through mountains that had witnessed Cold War paranoia and would witness this war too, Reaper felt something close to peace. Not the peace of victory, that was still months or years away, but the peace of knowing she was fighting for something that mattered, that the warriors who died would be honored, that the villains who killed them would face consequences. That service meant more than sacrifice for someone else's profit. The only easy day was yesterday. Tomorrow, the war would continue, but so would she.